In this video, we're breaking down 3 hours of the absolute worst things every regular show character has ever done. Let's get started. First up, we got Mordecai dumping CJ at Muscle Man's wedding. Mordecai hijacking Muscle Man's wedding ceremony to have a public emotional breakdown about his own relationship problems stands as one of the most selfish acts in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone repeatedly ignores clear warning signs, lies to themselves about being fine, and then spectacularly implodes in the worst possible setting. The damage from this single moment rippled through multiple relationships and turned what should have been Muscle Man's happiest day into a nightmare that nobody at Parkside Lux would ever forget. The warning sign started early in the morning before the wedding. Rigby asked Mordecai how things were going with CJ now that Margaret had admitted she had feelings for him. Mordecai called the situation pretty weird and admitted he had barely seen CJ because she had friends visiting from out of town. He specifically said they had not really had a chance to talk about stuff and called it awkward. When CJ called to confirm she was coming to the wedding, their conversation was stiff and uncomfortable. After hanging up, Mordecai told Rigby it was awkward. Rigby asked what he was going to do about it, and Mordecai responded that he did not know, but insisted it was fine. This pattern of claiming everything was fine while clearly struggling became the theme of Mordecai's behavior throughout the entire day. The wedding preparations kicked into gear with Benson organizing the groundskeepers. Skips rolled out an ice sculpture showing Muscle Man and Starla's heads kissing inside a horn of plenty. Muscle Man became extremely emotional while thanking everyone for being the best wedding planning team he could find. He broke down crying and accidentally smashed the sculpture, though Skips had prepared for this by having a replica ready. Benson laughed it off and said they needed to get Muscle Man married. The groom's emotional state was already fragile, which makes what happened later even worse. Everyone could see how much this day meant to him, which should have made Mordecai more aware that this was not the time or place for personal drama. Mordecai and Rigby were assigned to set up chairs at the wedding venue, Parkside Lux. While Mordecai tried to count out chairs, Rigby built them into a pyramid instead of arranging them in rows. Margaret called Mordecai during this setup to apologize for making things weird on their double date. She mentioned she had apologized to CJ too, and explained that Starla was being a high-maintenance bride. Starla was shown yelling at Eileen about gas-be-gone pills, while Eileen had gone to get her an iced coffee instead. Mordecai quickly ended the call with Margaret, then discovered Rigby had stacked all the chairs into a pyramid. Rigby smugly asked who dropped out of art school, referencing Mordecai's past. When guests started arriving, Mordecai was working as an usher with Rigby. Margaret arrived first, and Mordecai immediately got flourished. He complimented her shoes, which were Pacific blue pumps, but awkwardly called them dress shoes, while Rigby shook his head at how bad this was going. Margaret said Mordecai looked really nice, and he nervously responded by calling his tuxedo "these old rags." Margaret asked if he could usher her to her seat, but Mordecai spotted CJ arriving on her bike wearing a mauve dress. He nervously told Margaret she could sit wherever or whatever, completely abandoning her. Rigby leaned against the wall and sighed in relief that this interaction was over. CJ arrived and Mordecai told her she looked amazing. They locked arms and headed inside together. Mordecai mentioned there was a separate deep fryer for each table, and CJ joked she would need her own. She apologized for being distant that week and said she had been doing a lot of thinking, but Benson urgently called Mordecai on the radio before she could finish. Things were really bad, and they needed backup immediately. This interruption prevented what might have been an important conversation that could have avoided the disaster to come. Muscle Man was having a complete meltdown in his suite. The room was left in shambles with torn curtains. He was preparing to stab a hole in the wall with a curtain rod when Mordecai grabbed it to stop him. Muscle Man explained he did not have a letter from Muscle Dad, and there was no way his father would have forgotten to leave him a letter for the most important day of his life. Rigby suggested looking in the trailer, which made Muscle Man violently kick a chair across the room, hard enough that its legs got stuck in the wall. Benson warned him that the show Married and Broke would not cover damages. High Five Ghost calmed Muscle Man down and told Mordecai and Rigby to find the letter, even if they had to write it themselves. He specifically said not to come back without that letter. Mordecai and Rigby searched through Muscle Man's trailer, which was filled with trash and junk. Rigby found a moldy sandwich with a living bat inside that flew around, screeching. Mordecai complained that he just wanted to get this dumb day over with. Rigby noticed Mordecai seemed on edge and asked if he had decided what he was going to do about CJ. Mordecai insisted he was with CJ. They were happy and it was good. When pressed, he got slightly irritated and asked what Rigby would know about relationships anyway. This pushed Rigby to reveal something huge. Rigby shouted that he and Eileen had been dating for a couple of months. Mordecai gasped in shock and dropped a coffee mug that somehow appeared out of nowhere, which broke and spilled on the floor. Rigby showed off his matching bracelet that read, "His Heart," and explained they had been dating for months. He said they did not want to shove their happiness down Mordecai's throat, though Rigby admitted he personally wanted to, but Eileen told him not to. Rigby explained he had been really happy the last few months and thought Mordecai deserved to be happy too. He advised Mordecai to go with his gut for once, pointing out that he never thinks things through and his life rules. Rigby then found a chocolate milkshake in the trash and drank it. Mordecai thanked Rigby but said relationships are always complicated. Rigby countered that he and Eileen had been dating for months, and Mordecai never even noticed, proving it does not need to be that complicated. High Five Ghost called to ask how much time they had. The scene cut to show Pops already officiating the ceremony with Starla saying, "I do," and Pops asking Muscle Man if he does. Fives told them they did not have much time. Rigby kicked some speakers in frustration about all the junk, which caused a mountain of trash to fall on him. Mordecai pulled him out, and Rigby found himself holding an envelope with "Wedding Day" written on it. They rushed back to the venue. Pops was asking Muscle Man if he would stay with Starla as long as they both shall live. Muscle Man panicked and shouted he could not do it. The crowd gasped in shock. Starla worriedly said his name, Mitch. Muscle Man apologized to her and explained this was the biggest moment of his life, and he could not go through with it until he talked to his dad. Right then, Mordecai and Rigby burst through the double doors with the letter. Rigby handed it to Muscle Man, who was relieved and knew he could count on them. He tried to read it but started crying and fell to his knees saying he felt too much. He asked Mordecai to read it for him. Mordecai walked up to the microphone and read the letter aloud. Muscle Dad had written that finding a co-pilot to navigate the highway of life was tough and that Muscle Man made him proud. The letter explained that knowing you hitched the right trailer to the right rig was no easy feat. In any relationship, having doubts was normal, but the old Sorenstein rule said to trust your gut. The letter said, Muscle Man's gut told him he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Starla, and it was the same gut that filled with butterflies when he made her smile. The letter ended by saying the Sorensteins have big guts for a reason, and that it was not fat, but wisdom. Muscle Man wiped his tears, smiled, and told Pops to proceed with the ceremony. This is where everything went completely wrong. Instead of stepping aside and letting the ceremony continue, Mordecai interrupted Pops before he could even finish saying, "Do you, Muscle?" Mordecai announced that Muscle Dad was right and finding the right person was hard. He said he had been telling himself there was no such thing as soulmates, but now he was not sure. He pointed at Muscle Man and Starla and said they were designed for each other. Then he turned to the entire wedding crowd and asked where his soulmate was. He said his soulmate could be anyone in the room. He pointed at two random guests named Quips and Monica and said maybe it was them. He pointed at an old lady and said maybe it was her. Benson whispered angrily, asking why Mordecai was talking. Mordecai stammered that his point was he had been ignoring his gut for a long time. The camera showed CJ's shocked look turning into a glare. Mordecai said he had been avoiding his gut because he did not want to hurt anyone, but instead of saving their feelings, it just made everyone around him miserable. He announced that for the first time, he was going to take Rigby's advice. He walked over to CJ and said he needed to tell her something. CJ stood up and told him to stop because she already knew what he was going to say. With tears welling in her eyes, she asked if he did not know who his soulmate was. Mordecai had no response. CJ sighed and handed him the charm bracelet from their Real Date episode. She pointed out he did not even point in her direction when speculating about soulmates. CJ ran from the altar crying, while Mordecai called after her. Muscleman angrily asked if Mordecai was finished hijacking his wedding, and if it was okay if they could get married now. Starla added that the sooner they finished, the sooner they could start up the Friars. Mordecai apologized and ran off. Muscleman said, "I do," and stomped on a glass wrapped in cloth, following Jewish wedding tradition. The reception showed various meats being dumped into deep fryers, people dancing, and Muscleman throwing his jacket like a bouquet, with Benson catching it. A turducken was deep-fried with such force that it blasted through the ceiling and landed on Benson's car, completely destroying it. Benson ran toward his car, screaming in horror. Outside the venue, Rigby found Mordecai after he had talked with CJ. Mordecai explained that he and CJ were going to take a break for a while. Rigby sarcastically asked if when he said, "Go with your gut," Mordecai heard, "Completely lose your mind and try to dump your girlfriend at a wedding," because that seemed to be the option Mordecai went with. Mordecai said he was no good at this stuff, and Rigby agreed, calling him the worst. Mordecai suggested maybe he was not cut out for romance junk, and Rigby said, "Definitely not." When Mordecai got annoyed about Rigby rubbing in that he had a girlfriend, Rigby said it would be all right and suggested getting fried foods. The episode ended with Benson slamming his head on the hood of his destroyed car in despair. The sheer selfishness of Mordecai's actions cannot be overstated. He spent the entire day claiming he was fine while clearly spiraling. He had multiple opportunities to deal with his feelings privately, but chose denial instead. When Rigby explicitly asked him to figure out what he was going to do, Mordecai dismissed it. When Margaret called to apologize, Mordecai brushed it off. When CJ tried to have a serious conversation before the ceremony, Mordecai got interrupted but never followed up. He could have pulled CJ aside at any point during the reception. He could have waited until after the wedding. He could have processed the letter's message privately and talked to people later. Instead, he chose the exact moment when all eyes were on Muscleman and Starla, when Pops was literally in the middle of officiating the ceremony, to have his existential crisis about soulmates. The damage Mordecai caused went far beyond just his relationship with CJ. He humiliated her in front of everyone they knew. He turned Muscleman's emotional wedding day into a spectacle about himself. He disrespected Pops, who was serving as the officiant. He made Margaret uncomfortable by pointing vaguely toward her section while discussing soulmates. He validated every fear CJ ever had about whether Mordecai was truly over Margaret. The fact that he pointed at random people, including an elderly woman, while asking if they might be his soulmate, showed how little thought he put into his words. He was just word-vomiting his feelings all over everyone within earshot. Rigby's advice to trust your gut was meant to help Mordecai figure out his feelings and make an honest decision about his relationship. It was not an instruction to publicly humiliate his girlfriend at someone else's wedding. The fact that Rigby had to spell this out afterward, sarcastically asking if Mordecai heard, "Completely lose your mind and try to dump your girlfriend at a wedding," shows how badly Mordecai misinterpreted simple advice. Rigby and Eileen had been quietly happy for months without making it everyone else's problem. They managed their relationship without creating public scenes or hurting people around them. Mordecai could not manage basic discretion for even one day. The episode title, "Dumped at the Altar," takes on multiple meanings. Muscleman almost dumped Starla at the altar when he said he could not go through without his father's letter. But the real dumping happened when CJ essentially ended things with Mordecai right there at the wedding. She dumped him at the altar, though technically it was Mordecai's own actions that caused it. He dumped the relationship by admitting publicly that he did not know if CJ was his soulmate. The altar became the site of multiple relationship crises, but only one was actually appropriate for that setting. This episode serves as a perfect example of how avoiding difficult conversations makes everything worse. Mordecai knew things were awkward with CJ from the very start of the episode. He admitted it out loud to Rigby. But instead of being honest with CJ or honest with himself, he kept insisting everything was fine. This pattern of avoidance built up pressure until it exploded in the most destructive way possible. If Mordecai had simply been honest with CJ earlier in the week when she was thinking things through, they could have had a private conversation like adults. Instead, his cowardice turned into a public disaster that hurt everyone involved. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, Mordecai killing Rigby out of jealousy. Time reset. Mordecai destroying every clock in the house and melting them in a microwave just to sabotage his best friend's date represents one of the most unhinged acts of jealousy in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone refuses to admit their feelings and lets resentment build until it explodes into actual property destruction and manslaughter. The fact that Mordecai literally killed Rigby during their fight through the time stream makes this easily one of the darkest moments in the entire series, even though Father Time reversed it with a do-over. The episode started at the coffee shop where Mordecai and Rigby were watching a movie trailer for Zombie Dinner Party. The trailer showed blood, guts, and zombies having a dinner party with a screaming policeman. Mordecai said it looked awesome. Rigby threw 2 tickets on the table and revealed he got them tickets for opening night. Mordecai explained he already got 2 tickets for Pajama Sisters 2 because he was finally going to try asking Margaret out. Rigby complained that Pajama Sisters 2 was just a chick flick where people would sit around talking about their feelings while fully clothed. He asked if Mordecai knew how hard it was to get the zombie dinner party tickets. Margaret came over and apologized for the holdup on their food. Mordecai tried to ask her out, but could only stammer with a bunch of sounds. Rigby interrupted and made a coffee pun, saying Mordecai had a hard time trying to espresso himself. Margaret laughed at the joke and said she would be right back with their food. After she left, Rigby asked if Mordecai saw how hard Margaret laughed at him. Mordecai said it was not funny, but Rigby insisted it was and asked what Mordecai's problem was. This was the first sign of tension between them over Margaret. Margaret brought their food and put down 2 salads. Rigby asked where his French dip was, and Margaret realized she messed up the order. Rigby made another pun, asking if everything was okay because Margaret seemed like she had a full plate. Margaret laughed again and explained she was stressed because she was moving out of her place that day. Mordecai immediately volunteered to help her move. Rigby also volunteered to help. Margaret asked if they could come by in an hour, and Rigby made another pun about it being a moving experience. Margaret laughed and said, "Rigby!" in an amused tone. Mordecai kicked Rigby under the table out of frustration. When Rigby asked what that was for, Mordecai claimed it was nothing. Rigby realized Mordecai was jealous. Mordecai denied being jealous, but Rigby called him out on it. Rigby said Mordecai was jealous because Rigby made Margaret laugh, while all Mordecai did was stammer with sounds. Mordecai told Rigby to stay out of his way when helping Margaret move. This showed Mordecai was already viewing Rigby as competition rather than his best friend helping him with a favor for the girl he liked. At Margaret's apartment, they helped load boxes into a moving truck. Mordecai tried to ask Margaret out, but ended up just asking if she wanted him to pick up a box. Margaret said yes, and warned him the last box was really heavy. Mordecai insisted he had it, and struggled to carry the heavy box to the truck. Meanwhile, Rigby stood inside a cardboard box and asked Margaret, "Briefs or boxers?" by pulling the box up and down around his body. Margaret laughed and told Rigby he was funny. She went to talk to the manager and said she would be right back. Mordecai told Rigby he better leave because he was ruining Mordecai's chances with Margaret. Rigby pointed out that Mordecai had not even made a move yet and said Mordecai would end up seeing zombie dinner party with him anyway. Mordecai told Rigby to quit screwing things up for him. Rigby accused Mordecai of being jealous that Rigby could talk to girls and Mordecai could not. They saw Margaret walking back toward them. Rigby asked if Mordecai was going to ask her out or what. Margaret asked if they were ready to call it a day. Mordecai started stammering again, saying Margaret obviously did not have to, but struggling to finish his sentence. Rigby interrupted and asked Margaret if she wanted to see something cool. He showed her the 2 zombie dinner party premiere tickets and asked if she wanted to go with him that night. Margaret was excited that Rigby got tickets and said she would totally go with him. She said Mordecai had to come too. Rigby said Mordecai could not come because he only got 2 tickets. Margaret said maybe next time, and Mordecai claimed it was cool and told them to have a good time. Margaret said she would see Rigby at 8 and got into the truck. This moment marked the point where Rigby crossed a major line. He knew Mordecai had been trying to ask Margaret out all day. He knew Mordecai had feelings for her. He knew Mordecai got tickets specifically to take Margaret to a movie. But Rigby swooped in and used the tickets Mordecai had helped him want to see to ask out the girl Mordecai liked. Rigby was not interested in Margaret romantically. He just wanted to see the movie and was angry that Mordecai chose Margaret over their friendship. So Rigby weaponized the movie tickets as revenge for feeling ditched. After Margaret left, Mordecai told Rigby he would go to the movie with him if Rigby just called it off with Margaret. Rigby refused and said Mordecai had his chance and blew it. He kept repeating, "You blew it," in a mocking tone. Mordecai asked for another chance. Rigby said he would give Mordecai another chance if Mordecai admitted he was jealous. Mordecai refused to admit it. Rigby said then he was still going out with Margaret and repeated the "you blew it again" taunt. The scene cut to Rigby on the computer at the park, showing Mordecai the trailer for Pajama Sisters 2. The trailer showed a girl asking why someone does not like her while crying. The comments on the video said the movie sucked. Rigby said the movie was bombing, but still doing better than Mordecai did with Margaret. He announced there were 3 more hours until his date. The next scene showed Rigby in the kitchen talking to Muscle Man, saying the best thing about Margaret was that she was not going out with Mordecai. Both of them said, "Oh!" and Rigby announced 2 more hours until his date. In the living room, Mordecai and Rigby played a video game. Rigby won and imitated Margaret asking Mordecai for help with heavy boxes, then said Mordecai was too busy not asking her out. The game showed a female character coming out as a victory reward, and Rigby pretended to tongue-kiss the screen while staring at Mordecai. He announced only 1 more hour until his date, and said that was exactly how it was going to go down. This constant taunting throughout the day pushed Mordecai closer and closer to snapping. That night, Mordecai sat alone in the living room with TV static on the screen. Rigby came out wearing a black tie with his hair combed back, getting ready for his date with Margaret. He called Mordecai Pajama Sister and mocked him for watching TV all by himself, saying it did not surprise him since Mordecai could not talk to girls. Mordecai warned Rigby that he better call Margaret and cancel. Rigby said he could not cancel because that would be rude, and he could not be rude to the ladies. He checked his watch and said he had 20 minutes until his date. Mordecai asked if Rigby was sure it was only 20 minutes. Rigby looked at his watch again and discovered there was no battery inside. He asked what Mordecai did with his battery. Mordecai said it could be 20 minutes until the date, or maybe half an hour, or maybe Rigby already missed it. Rigby said he would find out what time it was and ran to check clocks around the house. Mordecai chased after him. The first clock was on top of a shelf, which Mordecai easily grabbed. The second was Pop's cuckoo clock, and Mordecai kept taking every clock in the house. The last clock Rigby tried to check was the microwave clock, but Mordecai blocked it with his hand. Mordecai told Rigby to call it off with Margaret. Rigby accused Mordecai of being jealous and said it was all over his face. Mordecai claimed his face was not jealous and put all the clocks inside the microwave. Rigby asked what Mordecai was doing and said he could not do that. Mordecai asked, "Can't do what, this?" and shut the microwave door. He turned on the microwave and all the clocks melted. Mordecai said now Rigby would never be on time for his date. This was where Mordecai's actions became genuinely destructive and crazy. He did not just hide one clock. He systematically hunted down every single timepiece in the house, including Pop's personal cuckoo clock. Then, he deliberately destroyed them all by melting them in the microwave. This was not just sabotaging Rigby's date. This was destroying shared household property and items belonging to other people just to hurt his best friend. The microwave probably got ruined too. Mordecai was willing to cause hundreds of dollars in damage and make everyone else's lives harder just because he could not handle his jealousy. Rigby jumped on Mordecai and yelled to give back the clocks. They fought, and Mordecai accidentally got tackled into the microwave. This created a powerful electrical surge that teleported them away. They both screamed as they moved at top speed through what appeared to be the time stream. Rigby yelled, asking what Mordecai's problem was and why he had to be jealous all the time. Mordecai told him to shut up and said this was all Rigby's fault. He said he finally got a chance to ask out Margaret, but Rigby had to butt in and ruin everything. Rigby yelled back that he just wanted to see zombie dinner party with his bro, who flaked on him for some girl who did not even know Mordecai existed. Rigby pushed Mordecai during this argument. Mordecai became enraged and yelled that he would kill Rigby. Mordecai then shoved Rigby hard. Rigby fell off the microwave into the time stream. He screamed as his body disintegrated and became dust. Rigby died. Mordecai gasped in horror and said, "That's not what I meant," repeatedly. He yelled for everything to go back. The teleportation finished, and Mordecai arrived in a dark abyss. He kept bumping into invisible barriers. A voice asked who was screwing around, and then a bunch of floating clocks appeared, forming a being made entirely of clocks. This was Father Time. He said Mordecai was the one who had been running around, microwaving all his clocks. Mordecai said he did not mean to. Father Time sarcastically repeated this and said Mordecai had wasted his time, Mordecai's time, and really wasted the time of the guy Mordecai killed. Father Time said Rigby was dead. Mordecai said he knew and asked if Father Time could bring Rigby back. Father Time said no, because Rigby's body had been blown to bits of star stuff. He said Mordecai would now spend eternity at the end of time, all because of his petty jealousy. Mordecai claimed he was not jealous. Father Time yelled that yes, he was. Mordecai insisted he was not. Father Time told him to be silent and peer into his truth hole. The clocks making up Father Time's body pulled back to reveal an enormous hourglass. The truth hole showed Mordecai every moment from the episode where he acted jealous. Mordecai admitted it was true that he was jealous of Rigby, and even though Rigby was annoying, he was still Mordecai's best friend. Mordecai said Father Time was right, and he deserved to be trapped there. Peter Time said house guests really annoyed him and told Mordecai to look at how he wrecked the living room, though nothing was visible since everything in that dimension was invisible. Mordecai faked an apology. Father Time said Mordecai better be sorry and agreed to give him a do-over just this once. He warned Mordecai to stop bottling up emotions, because if Father Time ever got him back there again, Mordecai would be sorry. Father Time told Mordecai to get on the time pony, which was also invisible. Mordecai got on the invisible pony, and Father Time criticized how Mordecai was riding it before telling him to get out of his dimension. The time pony rode back through time to the coffee shop where the episode started. everything reset. Rigby was alive again thanks to Father Time's do-over. Mordecai was shocked to see Rigby sitting there. The zombie dinner party trailer played again. Mordecai said it looked awesome. Rigby threw the 2 tickets on the table and asked if Mordecai wanted to go with him. Mordecai said yes, and Rigby smiled. Margaret came over to say their food was almost ready and apologized for the holdup. Mordecai tried making a pun himself this time, saying it looked like Margaret had a latte on her plate. He laughed nervously. Rigby still made his espresso joke. Margaret laughed and said it was a good one before leaving to get their food. Rigby asked if Mordecai saw how hard Margaret laughed at him. Mordecai looked jealous again. Rigby called him out and told him to admit it. Mordecai started to say he was not jealous, but then admitted he was, maybe just a little bit. The episode ended there. The episode shows both Mordecai and Rigby at their worst. Rigby knew Mordecai liked Margaret and deliberately asked her out using the movie tickets as revenge for feeling ditched. He spent the entire day rubbing it in Mordecai's face and making things worse. Rigby was being a terrible friend by weaponizing Margaret against Mordecai. But Mordecai's response was even worse. He destroyed everyone's property by melting all the clocks in the house. He sabotaged his best friend's date through deception and property destruction. And when confronted about it, he got so angry that he literally killed Rigby by pushing him into the time stream. The only reason Mordecai faced no consequences was because Father Time gave him a do-over and reset everything. Without that supernatural intervention, Mordecai would have been a murderer, stuck at the end of time forever. Rigby would have been permanently dead. All the clocks would have been destroyed. Mordecai's inability to admit he was jealous nearly cost him everything. Even with the do-over, Mordecai still looked jealous again at the end, showing he had not fully learned his lesson. He could only admit to being maybe just a little bit jealous, even after everything that happened. This episode serves as a warning about what happens when someone bottles up their emotions and refuses to be honest about their feelings. Father Time specifically told Mordecai to stop bottling up emotions. If Mordecai had just admitted from the start that he was jealous and upset about Rigby stealing his moment with Margaret, they could have talked it out like friends. Instead, Mordecai's denial led to escalating actions that ended in literal manslaughter. The fact that regular show treated jealousy as something that could lead to actual death through time travel shows how seriously the show took emotional honesty as a theme. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on is the moment Mordecai lies about being in a band and almost humiliates himself live on stage. Mordecai lying about having a real band just to impress Margaret represents one of the most elaborate cons in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone chooses to fake their way through life instead of being honest about their limitations. The lie spiraled so far out of control that Mordecai ended up lip-syncing on stage in front of everyone he knew, all because he could not admit to Margaret that the band shirts were just a stupid purchase he and Rigby made while pounding sodas late at night. The episode started with Rigby entering the coffee shop carrying a big box. He told Mordecai to check it out because their stuff was here. Mordecai asked what was here. Rigby explained it was their fake band t-shirts that they ordered from a website the night before. Mordecai was confused and asked what Rigby was talking about. Rigby said the previous night he asked if Mordecai wanted to be in a band, and Mordecai said yes. A flashback showed Mordecai and Rigby pounding sodas at the computer the night before. Mordecai said yes, he wanted to be in a band with Rigby, but they had to have a cool band name. They brainstormed names including Cool Dudes, Face Punch, Rad N Subtract, Helicopter Crash, and Mustache Cash Stash. They agreed on Mustache Cash Stash, and Mordecai told Rigby to order the shirts. Back in the present, Mordecai remembered ordering t-shirts. Rigby pulled out a shirt that said Mordecai and the Rigbys on it. Mordecai asked what happened to Mustache Cash Stash. Rigby said he changed it and asked if it was awesome. He threw a shirt at Mordecai. Mordecai complained that the new name was just their actual names and asked if they were really going to wear these around. Rigby immediately put his shirt on, despite Mordecai looking at him disapprovingly. This was the first red flag. They ordered shirts for a fake band while drunk on soda, and Rigby changed the name without asking. These were vanity shirts meant as a joke, not an actual musical project. Margaret came over and said the shirts looked rad, asking what they were for. Rigby said they were for their band. Margaret was impressed that they were in a band called Mordecai and the Rigbys and said it was so cool. This is where Mordecai made his critical mistake. He started to say, no, they were not in a band. But Margaret asked skeptically if it was some sort of fake band. Mordecai panicked and said, no, it was a real band, just not a big deal. Margaret gasped and said their band should play the open mic tomorrow night. She handed them a flyer. Mordecai said, yeah, for sure, totally. Margaret said it was awesome and she could not wait to see them play. She said she would see them then. Mordecai repeated, see you then, and face planted on the table after she left. Rigby asked what that was about. Mordecai admitted he just did not want Margaret to think they had a stupid fake band. Rigby pointed out that now they had to play the open mic tomorrow. Mordecai said they could totally do this and just had to learn one song by tomorrow night. Rigby repeated, one song, in disbelief. Mordecai confirmed, one song. The problem was obvious. Mordecai lied to look cool in front of Margaret instead of being honest. He could have laughed it off and explained they just ordered silly shirts as a joke. Margaret probably would have found that funny or endearing. Instead, Mordecai committed to a performance at an open mic when neither he nor Rigby had ever touched a musical instrument. The scene cut to the garage where Mordecai and Rigby turned on amplifiers and held guitars. Mordecai asked if Rigby was ready. Rigby said he was shreddy, a play on ready. Mordecai counted off 1, 2, 3, 4. They fumbled aimlessly at the guitar strings, producing horrible, distorted noise. Mordecai told them to stop and said they needed help. They went to Pop's room where Pops was playing a beautiful tune on a harpsichord. Pops loved the idea of a two-man ensemble. Mordecai asked how Pops learned to be so good. Pops pulled out records from inside his harpsichord bench. The first was called How to Be a Musician by Sir Geoffrey. Pops said if they threw these records on the old talking machine, they would be ready for the open mic in no time. Mordecai was shocked that Pops knew about the open mic night. Pops said yes, everybody knew about it, and they were all going to be there. Mordecai and Rigby groaned in despair. The lie had spread through their entire social circle. Everyone they knew was now expecting to see them perform. Back in the garage, Rigby placed the first record on an old gramophone. He told Mordecai that if they were going to learn this in time, Mordecai had to take it seriously. When Mordecai asked what he meant, Rigby told him to put on the shirt. Mordecai reluctantly put on his Mordecai and the Rigbys t-shirt and told Rigby to play the record. The scratchy recording played. Sir Geoffrey asked if they wanted to become musicians and said, "Bravo." He asked what the first thing all good musicians required was. Mordecai guessed talent. Sir Geoffrey said yes, good personal hygiene was the key to becoming a successful gentleman musician. Mordecai talked over the record and complained this was going to take like 10 years. Rigby said yeah, and there were still 2 more records after this one. Mordecai said there had to be a faster way. Sir Geoffrey's voice continued talking about getting washed up. Rigby suggested playing all 3 records at once. They set up 3 records playing simultaneously. Sir Geoffrey's voice overlapped from 3 different speakers talking about counting, minor sevenths, and harmonic tapping, while Mordecai and Rigby strummed badly at their guitars. Rigby yelled that this was not working because he could not understand anything. Mordecai said they had to keep going and asked if Rigby wanted to look like an idiot at the open mic. Mordecai shoved Rigby, who backed into an amplifier and knocked over an open soda can. The soda flowed over to a power strip on the floor, causing a small electrical fire with plenty of sparks. The power strip exploded, and a bolt of yellow energy flowed up through the cables into the gramophone needles. The gramophones shot yellow power through the room onto the ceiling as Mordecai and Rigby screamed. The room went black. When the lights came back, the room glowed yellow and buzzed. The gramophones levitated into midair, focused their power into a central ball, spun around, then shot a focused beam onto the floor. Stylized silhouettes of Mordecai and Rigby appeared. The new Mordecai's arm reached out, and the present Mordecai and Rigby's guitars floated away toward the new duo. Future Mordecai and future Rigby launched into superb guitar solos. Future Mordecai had a goatee and shades and was dressed somewhat like Michael Jackson. Future Rigby had shaved most of his tail, was wearing a flannel shirt and shades, skin-tight black pants, brown boots, and had a pencil-thin mustache. Mordecai asked who they were. Future Mordecai spoke in a British accent and said they were Mordecai and Rigby, asking who the blazes present Mordecai was. Future Mordecai laughed and said he was kidding because they knew who present Mordecai was, since they were him in 10 years. Future Rigby spoke in a British accent and said they were there to teach them how to rock. Mordecai said this was perfect. Rigby asked, wait, if they sucked, and future them was them, did not that mean future them sucked too? Future Mordecai asked if Rigby just heard them play. Future Rigby said they were super successful musicians in the future. Mordecai pointed out they were wearing sunglasses. Future Mordecai said their future was so bright they had to wear shades. Rigby asked if in the future they got that thing they always wanted. Future Rigby pulled up his shirt to reveal a biting shark tattoo on his armpit that moved when he moved his arm. Rigby said, "Awesome." Mordecai asked if in the future he got to go out with Margaret. Future Mordecai said suggestively that he would not want to ruin the surprise. Mordecai was disappointed. Future Mordecai said they promised to get them ready for tomorrow night's gig if they were willing to put in the work. Mordecai said, "Yeah, whatever it takes." Future Rigby said they said the same thing 10 years ago. A montage showed future Mordecai and Rigby teaching present Mordecai and Rigby all about rock moves and stances. Critically, they never taught them how to actually play an instrument at any point. They practiced on brooms instead of guitars and tried on new clothes, struggling to walk in skin-tight pants. The montage ended with future Mordecai and Rigby sitting on the amps applauding their old selves. Future Mordecai said that was it and they were ready. Present Mordecai and Rigby were confused. Mordecai complained they never learned how to play and had not even picked up a guitar. Mordecai said they got the look, they got the moves down, he knew the lyrics backwards and forwards, but they needed to learn how to play. Future Mordecai told them not to worry because they knew enough and would be fine. He said besides, it was too late to teach them anything else because the gig was in 20 minutes. Mordecai said they were screwed. This should have been another warning sign. The future versions of themselves spent all their training time on appearance and stage presence instead of actual musical skill. But Mordecai was so desperate to impress Margaret that he went along with it. The scene cut to the coffee shop where an excited crowd was going inside. Angel was playing a solo piece to wild acclaim. Benson, Skips, and Pops entered and took seats. Benson said he could not believe they were going to play tonight because those two slackers had never even picked up an instrument. He said this was going to be a train wreck. Pop said he loved trains. Angel finished his song to wild applause. Mordecai and Rigby watched from behind a curtain. Rigby said, "Dang," and Mordecai agreed. Mordecai walked backstage, holding his stomach and groaning. Rigby picked up a box and asked if he should hand out the last of the t-shirts. Mordecai asked if Rigby brought the t-shirts. Rigby said, "Yeah, for the fans." Mordecai said they did not even have any fans and grabbed the box of t-shirts. Margaret entered through the curtain and said, "Wow, they looked like rock stars." She asked if she could have one of the shirts. Mordecai gave her a small. Margaret struggled to pull on the shirt while Mordecai watched slack-jawed and dropped the box. Margaret eventually managed to get the shirt on and asked how she looked. After a pause, Mordecai said, "Amazing." Margaret said she could hand these out for them and get everyone pumped for the closing act. Mordecai and Rigby were shocked to learn they were the closing act. Margaret confirmed it, saying, "Save the best for last." She told them to break a leg and said she could not wait. The announcer called for everyone to give it up for Mordecai and the Rigbys. Future Mordecai and Rigby entered the dressing room and apologized for being late. Mordecai asked where they had been. Future Mordecai said they had to get them special guitar picks with a glowing lightning motif. Mordecai yelled that picks would not help because they still did not even know how to play. Future Mordecai said to just go out there because they would be great, just like future them were 10 years ago. Future Mordecai shoved Mordecai and Rigby through the curtain before they could protest, saying the crowd was waiting. Mordecai and Rigby appeared next to the stage. The crowd, now all dressed in the t-shirts Margaret handed out, cheered for them. They took to the stage under the Open Mic Night banner. They put on their guitars and plugged them into the amps as Mordecai took the microphone. Muscle Man was seen at the back of the crowd, standing on his chair and waving his shirt above his head, yelling for them to play a tasty lick. Mordecai and Rigby looked at each other helplessly. Future Rigby motioned for Rigby to strum his guitar. When Rigby did, a perfect chord came out. Mordecai did the same. Then they both launched into brilliant lead guitar parts. Benson said, "Holy crap," in shock. Mordecai started singing the song. More guitar solos followed, but Mordecai dropped his pick. While struggling to lift it up, he heard his guitar part still playing and his singing part still going, even though he was away from the microphone. He saw his guitar was plugged into the amp, but the amp was not plugged into anything. Mordecai yelled for Rigby. Rigby was still rocking out while the crowd cheered. Mordecai waved his arms to stop them. He saw a CD player at the side of the stage. Future Mordecai and Rigby waved and played air guitar. Mordecai rushed over and turned off the CD player. The crowd fell silent except for a few confused calls. Rigby was still playing the unplugged electric guitar badly, saying, "Yeah, baby!" Mordecai told him he could stop now. The crowd booed and heckled. Mordecai said, "Wait, he could explain." He admitted they were lip-syncing. The crowd booed again, and many threw their t-shirts onto the stage in disgust. Mordecai said he did not blame them. He explained they thought they could just order some t-shirts and pass themselves off as a band. But it turns out playing music was really hard to do. He said they just got caught up in the dream, and for a little while it was real, but that was over. He said lip-syncing was not cool, so they were breaking up the band. Future Mordecai ran onto the stage with Future Rigby asking why Mordecai stopped because it was going great. Mordecai accused them of tricking him and Rigby into lip-syncing. Future Mordecai said they became rich and famous because of lip-syncing and asked if Mordecai wanted to be part of that. Mordecai angrily said no, that was lame. He said future Mordecai may be him, but that was not the him he wanted to be. Rigby agreed. Mordecai announced that Mordecai and the Rigbys was over. Both he and Rigby took off their t-shirts. Future Mordecai and Future Rigby began to fade from view. Future Mordecai told Mordecai to think about what he was doing. Future Rigby told him to stop. Future Mordecai asked if Mordecai broke up the band. What were they going to do in the future? Mordecai said he would not want to ruin the surprise, using Future Mordecai's earlier line against him. Mordecai started to rip his t-shirt. Future Mordecai and Future Rigby yelled no, The t-shirt ripped in two, and future Mordecai and future Rigby exploded in a ball of white light that dazzled the crowd. After a moment of shocked silence, Benson rose to his feet and clapped. Slowly, the rest of the crowd joined in and cheered. Rigby said he did not know why Mordecai thought the open mic would be embarrassing because this was awesome. Margaret waved through the crowd, calling for Mordecai. Mordecai waved back and fought through the crowd, calling for Margaret. They reached each other, and Margaret said what Mordecai said up there was pretty cool. Mordecai thanked her. Margaret then asked if he had met her new boyfriend, Angel. Mordecai looked stunned. Angel said they should go because they did not want to be late for their dinner reservations, which he sang. Margaret said, "Oh yeah," and told them she would see them later. She told Angel he had such a great voice. Mordecai and Rigby stood alone. After a pause, Rigby suggested maybe Mordecai should have just kept lip-syncing. The entire disaster could have been avoided if Mordecai had simply been honest with Margaret from the start. When she asked about the shirts, he could have laughed and said they ordered them as a joke while drinking too much soda. Margaret probably would have found that funny or relatable. Instead, Mordecai's pride and desperation to look cool led him to construct an elaborate lie. He agreed to perform at an open mic despite having zero musical ability. He spent hours learning stage moves and outfits instead of actual music skills because his future self was also a fraud who lip-synced. The future versions of Mordecai and Rigby represent the worst possible outcome of choosing appearance over substance. They became rich and famous through deception rather than genuine talent.
They wore sunglasses and fancy clothes and had British accents, but it was all built on a lie.
When present Mordecai finally discovered the truth and called them out, future Mordecai tried to convince him that being a fraud was worth it for the money and fame. This shows how far down the path of dishonesty Mordecai could have gone if he continued prioritizing image over authenticity. The episode serves as a lesson about the dangers of faking your way through life. Mordecai got lucky that the crowd applauded his honesty after he came clean, but he only came clean after getting caught red-handed with the unplugged amplifiers and CD player. If he had successfully lip-synced the entire performance, he probably would have continued the lie. The moral victory at the end feels hollow because Mordecai was forced into honesty by circumstances rather than choosing it voluntarily. And his reward for finally being honest was discovering that Margaret had a boyfriend, suggesting that maybe honesty does not always pay off in the short term, even if it's the right thing to do long term. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Rigby weaponizing solids to ruin Mordecai's chance with Margaret. Rigby weaponizing the solid system to systematically destroy Mordecai's date with Margaret represents one of the most calculated acts of sabotage in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone agrees to help their best friend, but secretly resents the situation so much that they spend an entire evening finding creative ways to humiliate them. The fact that Rigby's abuse of solids literally almost destroyed the house and killed everyone demonstrates how petty revenge can spiral into genuine danger when left unchecked. The episode opened with Rigby on the couch watching TV when Mordecai walked up. Rigby asked Mordecai to do him a solid and get him a lemonade from the kitchen. Mordecai agreed, but said Rigby owed him a solid. Rigby confirmed that was how solids worked. A solid was basically a favor where if someone did you a solid, you owed them one back. The episode showed a montage of Mordecai and Rigby trading solids back and forth. Mordecai asked Rigby to change the channel. Rigby asked Mordecai to pass the remote. Mordecai asked Rigby to turn a comic book page. Rigby asked Mordecai to dry his hands while flapping them. Mordecai asked Rigby to fluff a cushion. Rigby asked Mordecai to sharpen his pencil. Mordecai asked Rigby to fold socks. Rigby asked Mordecai to cheese some nachos. They laughed goofily as Mordecai squirted cheese on a whole box of nachos. Pops and Skips drove by in a cart. They greeted each other. Skips asked if they wanted some chips with that cheese. Rigby admitted they overdid it with the cheese and threw the nachos at a tree. Everyone laughed. Pops asked if they were supposed to be working at the snack bar that day. Mordecai and Rigby looked at each other. Rigby asked if they could do them a solid and cover for them. Skips warned them not to abuse the power of the solid because bad things would happen. Mordecai asked if Skips could at least pretend he did not see them. Skips agreed but said they owed him a solid. This was the first warning sign that the solid system could be dangerous if misused. Rigby suggested they should probably get out of there. Mordecai asked Rigby to do him a solid and buy him a cup of coffee. The scene cut to the coffee shop where Rigby asked Mordecai to do him a solid and pull out his seat. Mordecai pulled out the chair and Rigby sat down. Mordecai told Rigby not to look now, but Eileen was totally checking him out. The scene showed Eileen looking at Rigby while cleaning before looking away. Mordecai said he thought Eileen liked Rigby. Rigby told him to shut it. Mordecai said Rigby should go for it because they would make a cute couple. Rigby yelled at him to stop talking and repeatedly punched Mordecai. Mordecai said here was Rigby's chance because Eileen was coming over. Eileen brought their order and said she triple-dipped Rigby's sandwich just the way he liked it. She asked if Rigby liked miniature golf. Rigby stared at her, making no noise or movement. Eileen interpreted his silence as agreement and said she liked it too in an ironic way. She mentioned her shift ended early that night and asked if Rigby wanted to go. Mordecai elbow-nudged Rigby and asked, "Yeah, did he want to go?" Rigby said he was waxing his car tonight. Eileen said that was cool and clarified she did not mean it like a date. It would be a group thing with Rigby, Eileen, Mordecai, and Margaret. Mordecai looked surprised when Margaret was mentioned. Eileen said it was cool if Rigby was busy, totally cool. She said she would get them a refill and walked away looking depressed, calling herself an idiot twice. Rigby complained about why they had to come on her shift. Mordecai asked Rigby to do him a solid and go out with Eileen so Mordecai could go on a date with Margaret. Rigby asked what and why. Mordecai said this was his chance to finally get with Margaret. Rigby said no, he was not doing it. Mordecai offered to do Rigby's work for a week and let Rigby be player one at any video game. Rigby said there was no way he was going out with Eileen. Mordecai begged, saying Rigby had to do him this solid. Rigby said all right, he would do it for 10 solids. Mordecai hit the table and said that was ridiculous. Rigby said that was cool. Then Mordecai did not mind crying himself to sleep tonight instead of going on a hot date with Margaret. He even made up the nickname Mordecrying to mock Mordecai. Mordecai reluctantly agreed that he owed Rigby 10 solids. Rigby said then it was a date. This was where Rigby's plan became clear. He agreed to help Mordecai, but charged an extortionate price of 10 solids. Rigby knew exactly what he was doing. He was bitter about being forced to go on a date with someone he had no interest in, just so his best friend could chase Margaret. Instead of being honest about his feelings or just saying no, Rigby agreed but set himself up with massive leverage to make Mordecai miserable all night. 10 solids was an absurd amount that gave Rigby unlimited opportunities for revenge. Outside the coffee shop, Mordecai said he was going to make his move tonight with Margaret. Rigby sarcastically said, "Yeah, making his move to total loserdom." Mordecai told Rigby to be cool. Rigby said, "Oh, he would be cool all right, but he might have to use a solid or two to get through." This confirmed Rigby was already planning to abuse the solids during the date. Margaret and Eileen came out. Eileen told Rigby he looked nice. Rigby flatly said, "Oh, hey Eileen," with zero enthusiasm. Mordecai said he hoped everybody was ready for an awesome night and laid out plans for mini-golf, dinner, and a late movie screening. Margaret said, "Wow, Mordecai really figured out tonight's plans." Rigby said, "Yeah, he wanted to make it last because it would never happen again." Mordecai punched him. Margaret said they better get going if they were going to fit all that in. They walked to Margaret's car and she said it should be unlocked. Mordecai opened the car door while staring at Margaret and sighing lovingly. Rigby called out to Mordecai. When Mordecai turned to look, Rigby asked if Mordecai could do him a solid and hang back with Eileen. Mordecai reluctantly agreed. This was solid number 1. Rigby separated Mordecai from Margaret right at the start, ensuring Mordecai could not sit next to his crush in the car. The scene cut to Glow Fantasy mini golf course. Mordecai tried to have fun with Margaret by sticking 2 pencils on his teeth and imitating a vampire saying he wanted to suck her blood.
Margaret played along by defending herself with a putter.
Eileen tried to join the fun by kicking sand over golf balls and saying she just laid sea turtle eggs and was swimming out to sea, though many of her hatchlings would not live to adulthood. The others stared at Eileen awkwardly. Rigby said, "Let's just get this over with," and walked away from the group. Margaret lined up her golf ball to take a shot. Rigby gestured for Mordecai to come over. Rigby asked Mordecai to do him a solid and yell as loud as he could. Mordecai asked what and why, pointing out Rigby did not even get anything out of that. Rigby said, "Cool, then they could call off this stupid date and go home." Mordecai said, "Okay, he would do it." Mordecai screamed loudly. In the process, Margaret messed up her shot. Mordecai sheepishly laughed and said, "Hey, this was solid number 2. Rigby made Mordecai actively sabotage Margaret's mini golf shot for absolutely no reason except to be annoying. It made Mordecai look like a jerk in front of Margaret and disrupted her game. The scene transitioned to the 4 of them sitting at a bench having lunch near a food truck. Mordecai apologized to Margaret for ruining her shot earlier. Margaret said it was no big deal, especially since she beat them all anyway. Mordecai made Margaret a trophy out of fruit and made monster noises. Margaret said, "Wow, she would treasure it for as long as it stayed fresh." Rigby grumbled disapprovingly. Eileen threw spices at Rigby like confetti, celebrating his second place. Rigby groaned and put hot sauce on his burrito. He asked Mordecai to do him a solid and tell him if the burrito tasted fishy. Mordecai sighed as he grabbed the burrito and took a bite. Upon eating it, the blood vessels in his eyes expanded. He spat the burrito onto Margaret and took a sip of his drink, yelling about what Rigby put in it. Rigby just said, "Humph," smugly. Mordecai apologized to Margaret. She wiped the food off her top and sighed,
saying it was okay because she did not like that top anyway.
This was solid number 3. Rigby loaded his burrito with hot sauce, specifically so when he asked Mordecai to taste it, Mordecai would have an extreme reaction and spit food all over Margaret. This was deliberate humiliation designed to make Mordecai look disgusting in front of his crush. The scene cut to inside a movie theater where they were watching a film. Rigby asked Mordecai to do him a solid and get some popcorn. Mordecai said he was all out of money. Rigby clicked his tongue while pointing at Margaret, suggesting Mordecai borrow money from her. Mordecai asked Margaret if he could borrow $5. Margaret sounded annoyed but said sure. Mordecai thanked her and got out of his seat to get popcorn for Rigby. He passed by Margaret with the popcorn and gave it to Rigby, who started eating. Rigby then asked Mordecai to do him a solid and get some butter. Mordecai rose from his seat again to butter the popcorn before returning. This was solid number 4 and 5. Rigby made Mordecai borrow money from Margaret and then made multiple trips to get popcorn and butter, constantly disrupting the movie and making Mordecai look annoying. While Rigby ate his popcorn, Eileen reached out to hold Rigby's hand. Rigby quickly gave Eileen the popcorn instead. He told Mordecai his hands were all slick from the butter and asked him to do a solid and get some napkins. Mordecai pulled out napkins and said, "You mean these napkins?" before throwing them in Rigby's face and celebrating that someone just wasted their 6th solid. Rigby wiped his hands off and asked Mordecai to do him a solid and take the heat for something. Mordecai asked, take the heat for what? Rigby took a deep breath and blew out a fake fart sound. Mordecai groaned and stood up, apologizing to everybody in the theater. This was solid number 6 and 7. Rigby avoided holding hands with Eileen by using another solid,
then made Mordecai take blame for a fake fart in a crowded theater, publicly humiliating him.
The scene cut to the house. Eileen said "wow" about where they lived. Mordecai told them to make themselves at home. Rigby said he could go for some dessert and called for Mordecai. When Mordecai responded, Rigby asked him to do a solid and get them ice cream sandwiches. He then made it a double solid by asking for the good ones from the snack bar. Mordecai glared and said he would be right back. Eileen asked if they had any board games. When Mordecai returned with the ice cream, Muscle Man was there saying it was about time. Mordecai asked why Muscle Man and High Five Ghost were there. Muscle Man said Rigby told them there were ice cream sandwiches at this party. He snatched the bag from Mordecai. This was solid number 8 and 9. Rigby invited Muscle Man and High Five Ghost to crash the date without telling Mordecai, then made Mordecai walk all the way to the snack bar to get premium ice cream sandwiches to feed the party crashers. Margaret said it was getting pretty late and she thought she would go home. Mordecai begged her to stay because the night was still young. Eileen and Muscle Man convinced Margaret to stay. Mordecai asked to see Rigby in the kitchen. He grabbed Rigby by the arm and dragged him there, sternly saying they would be right back. In the kitchen, Mordecai asked why Rigby was using his solids to ruin his date with Margaret. Rigby asked why Mordecai used his solid to ruin Rigby's life. Mordecai face-palmed and told Rigby to quit being a baby. Rigby warned Mordecai not to mess with someone who still had one solid left. Margaret called from the other room that she was going to leave soon. Mordecai told Rigby to just use his last solid and get it over with, because he did not want Margaret to leave. Rigby said okay and asked if Mordecai could do him a solid, then whispered the request. Mordecai was disturbed and said no way, he was not doing that.
Rumbles could be heard, and the ground started shaking.
Rigby angrily said Mordecai had to do it because it was a solid. Mordecai said Rigby was insane and he was not doing it. The rumbles continued, but Mordecai ignored them and walked over to Margaret, asking if she wanted to check out his record collection before she left. Eileen encouraged Margaret to look while she stayed with Rigby. Rigby yelled for Mordecai. Mordecai told Margaret to just ignore him. The rumbling got worse, and everyone could hear it now. Rigby said Mordecai better do it. Mordecai told him to lay off. Margaret and Mordecai began going upstairs, but when Mordecai took a step on the first stair, a large earthquake occurred that slowly tore the house apart. Margaret asked what was happening. A piece of floor broke and hit Eileen in the face. Rigby pointed at Mordecai and said it was because he did not do the solid. Mordecai refused. The house rumbled even more. Everyone except Mordecai and Rigby grabbed any securing place possible. Rigby said they were going to die if Mordecai did not do it. Margaret screamed. Mordecai said he did not care and was not doing it. Benson, Skips, and Pops walked in. Benson asked what they were doing. Skips said he told them not to abuse the solids. Mordecai said it was not him, it was Rigby who asked him to do one worth like 10 solids. Skips asked what it was, and Mordecai whispered it to him. Skips said, "Wow, that was crazy." Rigby said Mordecai had to do it because it was a solid. Skips told Mordecai to do them a solid and do his solid. Mordecai refused. Margaret yelled for Mordecai to just do it already. Mordecai said she would never respect him again. Margaret said, not if he was just doing a solid, explaining that was what friends were for, and they came through for each other when they needed it most. Mordecai said he never thought of it that way before. Eileen said Margaret did solids for her all the time.
Margaret revealed she broke a date so Eileen could go out with Rigby.
Mordecai asked if Margaret was only there because she was doing Eileen a solid and looked down in shame. This was the crushing revelation. Margaret was never on a date with Mordecai. She was doing Eileen a favor the same way Mordecai manipulated Rigby into going. The entire night was built on forced favors rather than genuine interest. Rigby said they were really going to die if Mordecai did not do the solid. Margaret screamed as the stairs crumbled. Mordecai said, "Fine, Rigby won, and he would do it." Mordecai stood in front of everyone and crouched down, making weird noises. Pops covered his eyes and Skips shook his head. Muscleman said, "Oh no!" The transcript did not specify exactly what the embarrassing act was, but everyone watched in disgust while Rigby recorded it on tape. The house stopped shaking once Mordecai completed the humiliating solid. Later, Rigby, Pops, Muscleman, and High Five Ghost were watching the tape. Rigby told them to get ready and counted down. The tape showed Mordecai making honking and weird sounds. Everyone laughed. Mordecai walked downstairs with a displeased look, asking if they were watching it again. Rigby said this was a new, edited version, and told Mordecai to come see the look on his face because it was the best part. Muscleman said it was classic. Mordecai called Rigby a jerk and said to have fun with the tape because he was going to the arcade. He said he was done hanging out with Rigby, that Rigby was not his friend, and he was leaving. Rigby tried to stop Mordecai, saying not to be like that and offering to come along. Mordecai said, "No way." Rigby said, wait, he almost forgot he still owed Mordecai a solid. Mordecai asked what solid and what Rigby was talking about. Rigby reminded him of that solid where Mordecai told him to destroy the tape. Mordecai was confused. Rigby said, yeah, he was just about to do it and hoped there were no hard feelings.
Sigby destroyed the tape.
Muscleman complained about what was wrong with Rigby. Rigby apologized and said a solid was a solid. Mordecai called for Rigby, who responded. Mordecai asked Rigby to do him a solid and come to the arcade with him. They made up, and the episode ended. The episode shows Rigby at his absolute worst. He agreed to help his best friend, but charged an exploitative price, then spent the entire evening systematically sabotaging Mordecai's attempts to connect with Margaret. Every single solid was designed to humiliate, inconvenience, or embarrass Mordecai in front of his crush. The final solid was so extreme it literally threatened to destroy reality itself, nearly killing everyone in the house. Rigby's abuse of the solid system turned what could have been a fun double date into a nightmare where Mordecai had to degrade himself just to prevent an apocalypse. Only at the very end did Rigby show remorse by destroying the humiliating tape, but the damage was already done, and Margaret revealed she was never actually interested in Mordecai anyway. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Mordecai and Rigby waited 100 years for Benson eating both of the last ultimatum burgers in existence, just to spite Mordecai. And Rigby represents one of the most vindictive acts of revenge in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when a boss lets personal satisfaction override basic human decency. The burgers were served once every 100 years, making them literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Benson destroyed that opportunity for two of his employees purely out of spite, then mockingly sympathized with them while chewing. The fact that the truck exploded immediately afterward, making it impossible for anyone to ever get those burgers again, makes Benson's petty revenge even more cruel.
The episode began with Mordecai, Rigby,
Muscleman, High Five Ghost, Skips, and Pops sitting on the front steps of the house, excitedly discussing the Grill 'em Up truck and its best burger in the world called the Ultimatum. This was clearly a big deal to everyone. The excitement they showed established how much this burger meant to the entire group. Benson then pulled up on a golf cart and gave everyone a list of work to do before they could get their burger. He told Mordecai and Rigby specifically that they had a large amount of work to do, which culminated in cleaning out Skip's garage. As usual, Mordecai and Rigby had slacked off the previous week and neglected to do all these particular jobs. Benson stated that if Mordecai and Rigby did not finish all the work, they would be prohibited from getting an ultimatum. This was where Benson's approach became problematic. Everyone else got to eat the burger, but Benson singled out Mordecai and Rigby for punishment. While it was true they had slacked off and deserved consequences, using a once-in-a-lifetime food opportunity as leverage was unnecessarily cruel. Benson could have assigned them weekend work, docked their pay, given them extra shifts, or used any number of normal disciplinary measures. Instead, he held this centennial burger over their heads as motivation. The power dynamic was already skewed since Benson was their boss and could have simply ordered them to do the work. After several attempts to get a burger while working, Mordecai and Rigby kept getting caught by Benson. They were desperate to get an ultimatum. They resorted to asking the group to buy them a burger, but Skips told them the truck served one burger per customer. This meant there was no way around the system. Seeing the group each rave about the burger made Mordecai and Rigby disappointed that their prospects of getting one were minimal. Shortly after, Benson pulled up and found the two not working.
He assigned them to cleaning up Skip's garage and putting Pop's possessions into storage.
Mordecai and Rigby were frustrated and tired from cleaning the garage, but pressed on for the ultimatum. During the cleaning, they found a large object covered by a sheet and uncovered it to find a machine known as the Hologram 9000. Rigby quickly suggested they make holograms to trick Benson into thinking they were working. Mordecai initially disagreed, citing that they were almost done and the machine said it could kill you. The warning label about potential death should have been enough to stop them. But then the truck announced the last call for burgers, and Mordecai changed his mind. This decision showed how desperate the burger situation had made them. They were willing to risk a potentially deadly machine and deceive their boss just to get food. While this was obviously wrong, it revealed how much pressure Benson's ultimatum had created. Rigby entered the machine, and Mordecai set the Hologram 9000 to extremely realistic, which was the highest setting. Holograms of the duo were soon created, but were completely still with odd expressions and poses. Mordecai and Rigby set them up so it looked like they were working, and waited to see if Benson fell for it. Benson shortly drove by and spoke to the holograms as if they were the genuine article. Mordecai and Rigby ran to the Grill 'em Up truck to order their burgers from the head chef, A.J. Maldonado. As the chef cooked the burgers, Benson made another couple of visits to the hologram Mordecai and hologram Rigby. He became suspicious when he noticed that on every visit they were standing in the same positions and did not answer his questions. Benson approached the holograms and pushed them both over, finally realizing that Mordecai and Rigby had tricked him. He drove away in a rage. The holograms looked at each other, making the first movement since their creation.
The burgers were still cooking when Benson suddenly drove toward Mordecai and Rigby.
The burgers finished, and the chef commented that they were getting the last 2 burgers in a centennial. This detail is critical. A centennial means once every 100 years. These were not just the last 2 burgers of the day or week. These were the last 2 burgers that would exist for another century. The chef was specifically pointing out the historical significance of this moment. When Mordecai and Rigby reached for the burgers, their hands were slapped aside by their hologram counterparts. This is where things got chaotic. Mordecai, Rigby, and Benson all fought with the holograms but were defeated easily. The holograms were set to extremely realistic, which apparently meant they were stronger than the originals. Rigby picked up a rock and threw it at his hologram, shattering a hole in him. Realizing the holograms could be destroyed, Mordecai and Rigby began pelting them with rocks. Finally, Rigby took the wheel stopper from the Grill 'em Up truck, causing it to roll downhill. He and Mordecai threw the wheel stopper at their holograms, shattering them to pieces. They voiced their excitement to finally eat the burgers. After fighting deadly holograms and risking their lives, they had earned those burgers through combat. But then, they turned to see Benson spitefully eating them as retribution for the hologram ruse. This was the moment that defines Benson's cruelty in this episode. He did not eat the burgers because he was hungry. He did not eat them because he deserved them. He ate them specifically to hurt Mordecai and Rigby. The text explicitly states he did this spitefully and as retribution. He was getting revenge. Mordecai and Rigby speechlessly watched Benson finish the burgers and mockingly sympathize with them. The mocking sympathy made it even worse. Benson was not just taking something they wanted, he was rubbing it in their faces while doing it.
He was enjoying their suffering.
Benson then drove away, and Mordecai suggested they try to get more burgers, but they turned to see the truck was gone. Meanwhile, the truck rolled downhill into the crash pit with both the chef and server inside, and exploded. The explosion is the final piece that makes Benson's actions completely indefensible. Those were the last two ultimatum burgers that would exist for 100 years. The truck exploded with the chef inside, meaning no one could recreate the recipe or make more burgers. Benson destroyed the only chance anyone would have to taste those burgers for the next century. He did not just deny Mordecai and Rigby their burgers, he erased the burgers from existence purely out of spite. The fandom widely calls this Benson's worst moment for several reasons. First, the punishment did not fit the crime. Yes, Mordecai and Rigby used holograms to trick him. That was wrong and deserved consequences. But those consequences should have been work-related. Extra shifts, being written up, suspension, cleaning duty for a month, anything within the normal bounds of employer discipline. Instead, Benson chose to destroy a once-in-a-lifetime experience as revenge. He specifically ate both burgers when he could have eaten one and saved one for later. He made sure neither Mordecai nor Rigby got anything. Second, Benson had already won. The holograms were destroyed. Mordecai and Rigby were exposed and humiliated. They had fought for their lives against their own holographic clones. They were exhausted, defeated, and clearly knew they had messed up. Benson could have lectured them, assigned punishment, and let them have the burgers. Instead, he escalated to maximum petty revenge. He chose cruelty over mercy, even though the situation was already resolved in his favor. Third, Benson's actions hurt everyone, not just Mordecai and Rigby. The chef, A.J. Maldonado, had spent time cooking those burgers.
He took pride in serving the last two burgers in a centennial.
Benson's spite meant that work went to waste. The server was also in the truck when it exploded. While the episode presents this comically, Benson's actions directly contributed to the chaos that led to the truck rolling downhill. If he had not been so focused on revenge, the situation might have been different. Fourth, this was wildly disproportionate to Benson's usual management style. Yes, Benson was often angry and strict with Mordecai and Rigby throughout the series, but he usually punished them with work or yelling, not by destroying their dreams. This episode showed Benson at his absolute pettiest. He was not trying to teach them a lesson about responsibility or work ethic. He was just hurting them because he could. The mockingly sympathetic comments while eating proved this was about making them suffer, not about justice or consequences. Fifth, Benson ignored his own role in creating this situation. He was the one who made the burgers into a high-stakes ultimatum. He could have let everyone have a burger first and then assigned Mordecai and Rigby extra work as punishment for slacking. Instead, he dangled this once-in-a-century opportunity as motivation, which created the desperation that led to the hologram plan. Benson's management approach directly caused the problem he then punished them for. The episode serves as a warning about how authority figures can abuse their power through petty revenge. Benson had every right to be angry about being deceived. He had every right to punish his employees for not doing their work and for using dangerous equipment without permission. But eating both of their burgers while mocking them crossed the line from discipline into cruelty. It showed that Benson valued his own satisfaction over basic compassion for people under his authority. The once-in-a-centennial nature of the burgers cannot be overstated. This was not like denying them lunch or a snack. This was denying them something they would never have another opportunity to experience in their entire lives. Mordecai and Rigby would grow old and die before these burgers were served again. Benson knew this and chose spite anyway. He chose personal revenge over giving his employees a chance at a unique life experience. Some might argue Mordecai and Rigby deserved this for using the holograms, but proportionality matters in punishment. They tried to trick their boss to get food. That deserved consequences, but it did not deserve having a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity destroyed. Benson could have eaten one burger himself and made them watch, then given them the other to split. He could have made them do a month of extra work to earn the burgers back somehow. He could have done anything except destroy both burgers purely to hurt them. The mocking sympathy is what pushes this from bad to worst. Benson did not just take the burgers and leave. He made sure Mordecai and Rigby watched him eat. He commented sarcastically about how sorry he felt for them. He wanted them to suffer emotionally while he physically consumed what they had worked and fought for. This was psychological torture on top of the practical punishment. Benson weaponized food and authority to maximize his employees' pain. This episode reveals an ugly truth about Benson's character. When given the choice between being a boss who teaches lessons through fair consequences and being a boss who gets personal satisfaction from revenge, Benson chose revenge. He chose feeling good about hurting his employees over actually helping them learn. The fact that the episode ends with the truck exploding means there was no redemption, no chance for Benson to feel remorse and buy them replacement burgers later. His spite had permanent consequences that he presumably had to live with forever. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Benson secretly installing surveillance cameras across the entire park. Benson, escalating from a single workplace camera to installing surveillance equipment in his employees' bedrooms and bathrooms, represents one of the most invasive abuses of power in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when a boss prioritizes control over basic human dignity and privacy rights. The surveillance started as a reasonable response to workplace slacking, but spiraled into a full-blown surveillance state that terrorized every single person at the park. The fact that Benson signed a lifetime contract with a sentient eyeball that threatened to steal everyone's actual eyeballs demonstrates how his obsession with monitoring Mordecai and Rigby destroyed his judgment completely. The episode opened with Mordecai and Rigby having a staring contest while they were supposed to be washing the truck. Benson observed them from the window and asked what they were doing, saying he asked them to wash the truck 20 minutes ago and could not trust them to do anything. Mordecai claimed they were just taking a break. Mordecai and Rigby went back to washing the truck. Benson walked off, but then decided to turn around to see if they were still working. They were back to their staring contest. Benson held in his rage and was about to say something when he got interrupted. An infomercial voice asked if bosses were sick of slackers. Benson said, "Yeah." The TV showed a commercial for Peeps surveillance system. The infomercial asked if sleeping workers were a familiar sight, then showed how Peeps could turn slackers into hard workers with cameras surrounding them. A manager thanked Peeps. The infomercial announced it now had 4 different levels: Mooch Master, Slack Pack, Bum Blitz, and for the ultimate in worker productivity, Jeepers Peepers X Infinity with a Peeps lifetime guarantee. The commercial offered a free lens cleaning kit and mentioned in fast, fine print that cleaning could be extremely flammable, The offer was not valid or void. Peeps may be illegal in some countries or provinces, and it required a signature. This infomercial planted the seed for Benson's surveillance obsession. The warning signs were already there in the commercial itself. The mention that Peeps may be illegal in some countries should have been a red flag. The requirement for a signature on the highest level suggested serious legal commitments. The extremely flammable cleaning warning hinted at danger, but Benson was so focused on catching Mordecai and Rigby slacking that he ignored all these warnings. Sometime later, Benson approached Mordecai and Rigby with the new Peeps kit. Mordecai said they were just getting back to work. Benson said it was okay because he trusted them. When Mordecai asked, "Really?" Benson said of course he did, because now he had Peeps. He assembled the Moochmaster and said hello to Peeps, explaining it was a surveillance system. He said now he would be able to see what they were up to all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year. He asked if that was not great. He threw a rag to Mordecai and handed a bucket to Rigby, saying he would let them finish their work and reminding them he was watching. This first level was actually reasonable workplace surveillance. Benson had legitimate concerns about Mordecai and Rigby not doing their work. Installing one camera at a worksite to monitor if employees are completing assigned tasks falls within normal bounds of employer oversight. The problem was that Benson framed it as trust while simultaneously announcing total surveillance. If he actually trusted them, he would not need cameras. The 24/7, 365 comment was ominous, but at this point, referred to the camera being on all the time, not following them everywhere. Rigby said he did not think Benson trusted them at all.
Mordecai pointed out that Benson just put a camera in front of them.
Rigby asked what the big deal was since they were working and would get it done. Mordecai said they should show Benson by getting it done in no time. They got to washing the car. 5 minutes later, they were working at a much slower pace, and the Moochmaster camera lens zoomed in. Rigby said forget this and suggested finishing their staring contest. Mordecai said they could not because Benson was watching them. Benson and Skips watched the monitor showing Mordecai and Rigby washing the car. Benson said those slackers were finally working and Peeps was working like a charm. Skips asked why there was a jet outside. Benson said, "What?" And the screen showed a crude drawing of Mordecai and Rigby washing the car with a jet, saying, "You guys are doing great!" Benson yelled and cut to outside, where he saw the paper covering the lens and ripped it off, screaming in rage. Mordecai tried to explain, but Benson told them to get back to work immediately. Benson called Peeps and said he was going to take those slackers to level 2. This was where Benson started to escalate beyond reasonable measures. Mordecai and Rigby had found a clever way around the camera, but instead of just repositioning the camera or checking on them in person more often, Benson immediately jumped to level 2. The drawing trick proved they were still not working, but it did not justify the invasion of privacy that was about to come. The scene transitioned to the coffee shop, where Mordecai and Rigby were now wearing the Slack Pack, which were cameras attached to their bodies. Mordecai's camera got caught, but he moved it to proceed with Rigby. Mordecai said this sucked. Rigby agreed and said his was really chafing him. Mordecai said at least they were on break and could finish their staring contest. They started, but the Slack Pack camera blocked Mordecai's view. Mordecai said this was lame. Margaret asked what was with the cameras.
Mordecai claimed they were making an indie documentary.
Margaret said that was cool. Mordecai said it was pretty obscure art house stuff. Rigby said it was so indie, only one dude was going to see it. Margaret asked what it was called. Benson spoke over the microphone saying it was called Slackers 2, The Return of Mordecai and Rigby to Their Jobs, and announced break was over. Mordecai said they would take 2 lattes. Benson said over the microphone to make them to go. This level crossed a major line. The Slack pack meant Benson was now monitoring them during their break at a location off park property. Employees are entitled to privacy during their breaks. Benson was not just monitoring their work performance anymore, he was surveilling their personal conversations. He interrupted Mordecai's interaction with Margaret, which had nothing to do with work. He was controlling when their break ended remotely through the microphone. The chafing comment indicated these cameras were physically uncomfortable, meaning Benson was causing his employees physical discomfort as part of his surveillance. Back at the house, Benson observed Mordecai and Rigby washing dishes while Pops came in asking about the fancy new gadget. Benson explained it was called Peeps, and one window was hooked up to a camera on Rigby and one to Mordecai. He said it was foolproof and they would never slack off again. Benson said he could not believe they had been working for 3 hours. Pop said 3 hours meant they deserved an award. Benson agreed and said time to bust out the employee incentives. He hoped the coupons were still good. He pulled out a coupon for Luigi's one free personal pizza with purchase of equal or greater pizza. They went to the kitchen to surprise Mordecai and Rigby with coupons, but found the dishes still dirty. They saw a TV showing a split screen of dishwashing with the Slack packs pointed at 2 different sides of a screen. Benson ejected the tape, showing it was the World Dishwashing Championship 1982. Mordecai and Rigby were heard upstairs arguing about who blinked. Benson said that was it, and he had to make a phone call. This was the second time Mordecai and Rigby outsmarted the surveillance system. Instead of accepting that maybe surveillance was not the answer, Benson escalated again. A montage began showing the Bum Blitz cameras everywhere. Mordecai was asleep and woke up to a camera. Mordecai screamed, then the whole bedroom had cameras all over it. Mordecai removed his sheets to reveal cameras even under his sheet. He yelled for Rigby. Rigby bonked his head against a camera and said, "Ow!" Benson watched from all the cameras in his office. He had somehow grown a 5 o'clock shadow, suggesting he had been up all night watching. Mordecai and Rigby looked out the window to see cameras throughout the entire park. Mordecai said, "Crap! This level was completely illegal and unethical." Benson installed cameras in his employees' bedroom while they slept. There is no workplace justification for monitoring someone in their bed. The cameras under the sheets meant Benson was potentially watching them in states of undress. This was not workplace surveillance anymore. This was stalking. The montage showed Mordecai and Rigby eating breakfast under the watchful eyes of cameras. They were shown driving the cart, also camera-equipped. Cameras were even seen in the bathroom, with 4 cameras shown on a toilet. Bathroom cameras represent the absolute extreme of privacy violation. There are laws in virtually every jurisdiction against installing cameras in bathrooms for good reason. Benson had crossed from boss into predator territory. He was watching his employees in their most private, vulnerable moments. The fact that Mordecai said, "Dude, this has to stop," showed they recognized this had gone way too far. They were not complaining about reasonable workplace monitoring anymore. They were complaining about genuine harassment and violation of basic human dignity. That night, Mordecai and Rigby snuck into Benson's office while he was asleep at his desk. Mordecai asked if Rigby brought the hacking device. Rigby pulled out a thermos filled with coffee. Mordecai drank some, then in one move spilled coffee onto the keyboard, shutting off all the cameras. Benson woke up to see the mess. Mordecai and Rigby ran out of the room. Benson saw the thermos on the ground and screamed. He pulled out the Peeps manual and flipped through pages, then grabbed a phone to call Peeps. He demanded to be upgraded to Jeepers Peepers X Infinity immediately. The phone operator said that required a signature on a lifetime contract. Benson grimaced in frustration and said, "All right, whatever, just make it happen." A contract came through Benson's system. Benson grabbed the contract and signed his name on it. The phone operator thanked him for choosing Peeps surveillance systems and said to have a nice day. The contract disappeared into thin air. This was the moment Benson completely lost control of the situation. He was so obsessed with catching Mordecai and Rigby that he signed a lifetime contract without reading it. The magical disappearance of the contract should have been another warning sign that something supernatural was happening. The next morning, a Peeps truck backed up into the driveway. Benson ran up laughing maniacally to see the Jeepers Creepers X Infinity. The back doors opened, revealing a huge eyeball. Benson asked what it was. The Peeps eyeball said, "I'm Peeps." A montage showed Peeps spying on all the park workers, not just Mordecai and Rigby. They looked behind them to see the Peeps eyeball following them. Next was Pops taking a shower. He opened the curtains to see the Peeps eyeball and quickly backed away in fear. Third were Muscle Man and High Five Ghost.
Muscle Man twirled his shirt while watching monster trucks before the Peeps eyeball appeared to scare them.
Fourth was Skips fixing a bus. He slid under it to see the Peeps eyeball looking down. This was where Benson's actions hurt innocent people. Pops, Skips, Muscle Man, and High Five Ghost had done nothing wrong. They were not the ones slacking off. They had nothing to do with the original problem. But now they were all being surveilled by a giant, sentient eyeball because Benson could not control his obsession with monitoring Mordecai and Rigby. The shower scene with Pops was particularly disturbing. An elderly man was being watched while naked and vulnerable by an entity Benson had brought to the park. The montage showed Benson running through a green void in fear as Peeps' eyeballs showed up throughout his path. All the park workers ran through the bottom lid of the Peeps' eyeball as its pupil followed them. They got on a golf cart and Benson hit the accelerator. They thought they lost it, but it appeared again, then teleported to the top of the house. Mordecai yelled that this had gone too far. Skip said he could not work. Pop said he had not been able to sleep in a fortnight. Muscle Man said he had been so stressed that he was losing muscle mass. These complaints showed the real human cost of Benson's surveillance obsession. Pops had not slept in 2 weeks. Skips, the most reliable worker, could not do his job. Muscle Man was literally losing his physical health from stress. Benson's management decision had created a hostile work environment so severe that it was affecting everyone's mental and physical well-being. Benson said he knew and was going to take care of this mess. He called for Peeps. The Peeps eyeball teleported right to Benson and said yes. Benson said Peeps was creeping everyone out and had to go. The Peeps eyeball said it was here to stay. If Benson had read the lifetime guarantee he signed, the eyeball was going to watch them 24/7, 365 days a year, until Benson died. Benson screamed and ripped the contract to pieces. The Peeps eyeball said that was cool because it made copies. This revealed the ultimate consequence of Benson's obsession. He had signed away his autonomy and privacy forever. The lifetime contract meant Benson would be watched every moment until his death. He had not just violated his employees' privacy, he had violated his own. The fact that the eyeball made copies meant there was no escape. Benson had traded temporary control over Mordecai and Rigby for permanent loss of control over his own life. Mordecai proposed a staring contest. If they won, Peeps had to leave the park. The Peeps eyeball laughed and said they did not stand a chance. Rigby called it a giant eye sack. The Peeps eyeball said fine, but if it won, it was taking all their eyes. It pulled out a spoon and needle. Mordecai accepted. Benson asked how he could trust them to win. Mordecai admitted Benson could not trust them to do dishes or wash trucks, and really could not trust them not to fart in his coffee when he was not looking. Benson asked what? Mordecai said nothing. But what Benson could trust was their pointless skills during work time. The staring contest began. Mordecai and Peeps went into the evening without blinking with red eyes. When the Peeps eyeball appeared to cheat by having a little eyeball come out to rub his big eye, Rigby called it cheating. Peeps said it was not blinking. Then dozens of little eyes came out chanting, "Don't blink." Rigby shot one with a laser pointer. Peeps said that was cheating. Rigby said Peeps cheated first and it was time to kiss its greasy eye sacs goodnight. Rigby shot lasers at all the little eyes for 20 seconds until they were burnt out. Mordecai told Peeps not to blink. Peeps finally closed his eye and the gang cheered. Rigby shot Peeps' big eye with the laser pointer, setting it on fire. Peeps jumped into the lake, screaming. An ambulance saved Peeps,
who said all he saw was darkness.
The park workers cheered. Benson told Peeps to get out and stay out, then said he hoped Mordecai and Rigby learned something from all this. The episode ended with Mordecai's eyes permanently damaged and unable to blink, requiring him to go to the hospital. Benson learned nothing and blamed Mordecai and Rigby for the situation he created. He never apologized to Pops, Skips, Muscle Man, or High Five Ghost for subjecting them to surveillance. He never acknowledged that signing a lifetime contract with a supernatural entity was insane. He framed the entire disaster as a lesson for Mordecai and Rigby, rather than reflecting on his own catastrophic abuse of power as their manager. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Skips accidentally killing Rigby in an arm wrestling match. Skips accidentally killing Rigby during an arm wrestling rematch because he could not handle losing to someone he considered weaker represents one of the most extreme overreactions in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when pride and ego completely override common sense and proportional responses. The fact that Skips had to literally arm wrestle Death himself to resurrect Rigby demonstrates how far his obsession with being the strongest spiraled out of control. A friendly bar game turned into property destruction, invasion of privacy, manslaughter, and a supernatural confrontation, all because Skips could not accept that he lost 3 times in a row. The episode opened at the hospital with Rigby lying dead on a stretcher. A doctor shut Rigby's eyes and pulled a sheet over him, saying there was nothing they could do. Mordecai, Pops, Benson, and Skips stood around. Mordecai looked at Skips spitefully and said Skips could not let it go, asking if he hoped he got what he wanted. They all left while Skips looked after Rigby. This opening established immediately that Skips was responsible for Rigby's death, and that it happened because Skips would not let something go. The flashback then showed how this tragedy unfolded. The flashback began at McHooligan's bar. Benson told everyone that Skips was so strong he could take any one of them out in arm wrestling. Skips laughed modestly and said, "Nah." Benson said as Skips' boss, he ordered Skips to arm wrestle him. Everyone chanted for Skips. Skips said, "All right," if they insisted. He slammed Benson's arm immediately. Everyone cheered. Benson asked what he told them. Pops asked to go next. Skips slammed Pop's arm and Pops giggled. Mordecai said Skips could not take any of this. Skips slammed Mordecai's arm. Everyone chanted as Skips slammed High Five Ghost's arm. Skips slammed Muscle Man's arm. Everyone chanted Skips' name. This setup showed Skips defeating everyone easily. His reputation as the strongest person at the park was well established. Everyone expected him to win every arm wrestling match. This made what happened next even more shocking and embarrassing for Skips. Rigby said, now it was his turn. Everyone laughed at the idea of Rigby arm wrestling Skips. Rigby told Skips to set them up. Skips said, okay, he would go easy on Rigby. They clasped hands. Benson said this was going to be hilarious and told them to go. Rigby slammed Skips immediately. Rigby said haters were going to hate. Everyone laughed. This first loss should have been laughed off as a fluke or lucky shot. Rigby was clearly the weakest person at the table physically. Nobody expected him to win. But instead of taking it in stride, Skips reacted badly. He said enough and demanded they go again, claiming he was not ready. Rigby suggested maybe Skips was just getting weak in his old age, calling him Gramps. This insult about age clearly hit a nerve. Skips and Rigby clasped hands again. Benson told them to go. Everyone chanted, "Go!" Rigby slammed Skips again. Vigby celebrated, saying who was the strongest now, and bragging about 2 in a row. Everyone cheered and left. Skips stayed behind. 2 losses in a row should have raised questions about what was happening. Either Rigby had some trick or technique that was working, or Skips was having an off day. The reasonable response would be to congratulate Rigby and move on. Instead, Skips sat alone, brooding. Mordecai told Rigby that was awesome. Rigby said it was all in the wrist and also in the muscles. The scene cut to Skips sitting on the front steps looking dejected. Pop sat next to him and said Skips did a bang-up job at arm wrestling yesterday and was beating everyone. Skips said he did not beat Rigby. Pop said yes, Rigby was quite the arm wrestler. Skips said he was not the strongest anymore. This revealed Skips' core issue. His entire identity was wrapped up in being the strongest person at the park. Losing that title to Rigby of all people was devastating to his self-image. Pop said balderdash, and that Skips was the strongest person he knew. Pop said Skips was just having a bad day and should go up to Rigby and demand a rematch. Then Skips would see who the strongest was. Pops giggled and walked away. Skips thanked Pops. This was where Pops unintentionally encouraged Skips down a dangerous path. Instead of helping Skips accept the loss gracefully, Pops validated Skips' need for vindication through a rematch. The scene cut to Mordecai and Rigby inside playing Guitar Dude's reunion tour. They were focused on their game when Skips blocked the television. Mordecai and Rigby protested. Skips demanded a rematch with Rigby. Rigby said no. Skips repeated that he said he wanted a rematch. Rigby said he was busy. This was Rigby's right. He won fair and square as far as he knew. He had no obligation to give Skips a rematch. But Skips could not accept this answer. In a fit of rage, Skips took the game console, broke it in half over his knee, and then threw it at the wall before running away. Mordecai said, "Dude, not cool." Rigby said Skips would get over it. This property destruction was completely unacceptable. Skips destroyed something that belonged to Mordecai and Rigby because he was angry about losing an arm wrestling match. This was not his property to destroy. He damaged it purely out of spite and frustration. This showed how far Skips' emotional state had deteriorated. The scene cut to Skips working out in his room. Benson knocked and came in with Mordecai and Rigby. Benson asked if Skips broke their video game. Rigby confirmed, yes, he did. Benson said he wanted to hear it from Skips. Skips admitted, yeah. Benson was surprised and said he was sorry, but Skips was going to have to pay for it. Skips said, oh, he would pay for it, but only after Rigby gave him a rematch. He pointed at Rigby when saying this. Benson asked if that was what this was about. Skips said Benson would not understand. Benson scoffed and said, yeah, he guessed he would not understand. Rigby said he understood and that Skips just wanted to lose again. He told Skips, let's go. Skips set down a chest and put his arm on it, telling Rigby to set them up. Rigby clasped his hand with Skips. Benson said, ready, go! Rigby slammed Skips' arm for the 3rd time. Skips made a noise of surprise. 3 losses was absolutely humiliating for Skips. Benson told Skips to make sure he paid them by the end of the week. Skips said, yeah, he would. Rigby smugly asked what that was, saying he could not understand Skips because he did not speak second place. Rigby told Skips to make sure he paid them by the end of the week. This mocking was cruel, but Rigby had every right to gloat after winning 3 times. Mordecai, Rigby, and Benson left. Skips smashed the chest in a fit of rage over his loss. This destruction of his own property showed Skips was losing control of his emotions completely. The scene cut to nighttime, with everyone about to leave for McCooligans. Muscle Man slid down the banister excited about round 2. High Five Ghost called shotgun. Benson walked downstairs saying he hoped they got their drink tickets because drinks were on him up to $1.50 value. Pop said, "Splendid!" He could not wait to get an aguarita. Rigby said he was going to get an ice on the rocks. Mordecai said, "Oh man, his drink ticket." Benson told Mordecai to hustle. Mordecai said he would be back in a second. The scene cut to Mordecai and Rigby's room, where Skips was going through Rigby's drawer. The room was a complete mess, suggesting Skips had searched through everything. Mordecai caught Skips in the act. Mordecai asked what Skips was doing. Skips said nothing while hiding a sock behind his back. Mordecai gave him an unconvincing look. Skips admitted he was going through Rigby's stuff, saying Rigby was the strongest, so there had to be a trick. This invasion of privacy was another major violation. Skips had no right to search through Rigby's personal belongings. His desperation to find some explanation for losing had driven him to violate his co-worker's privacy. Mordecai said, "Dude," he could not stand to see Skips like this. Mordecai picked up his drink ticket and said 2 words, "Playco Arm Boy." He told Skips to look it up and left. This was where Mordecai revealed that Rigby had been cheating the whole time. Skips used the computer and watched the Playco Arm Boy commercial. A father and son were arm wrestling. The father slammed his son easily and laughed. The son frowned. Then the Playco Arm Boy appeared and the son smiled. An announcer explained how to use Playco Arm Boy. First, put it on. Second, conceal it. Third, sign their legal waiver. The father and son arm wrestled again. The father asked if the son was ready for round 2. There was a smash sound and the father yelped, saying, "That really hurt." Another announcer said it was a subsidiary of Yoshimoto Cybernetics. The commercial ended and Skips became furious. A montage showed Skips training intensely with various exercises. He did one-handed push-ups, lifted a barbell, and bench pressed the van. The scene split into 3 parts, showing more exercises. Skips skipped out the door, but stopped to glare at a punching bag. He gave it one good punch that destroyed it and walked out. This training montage showed Skips preparing for revenge. He was not training to become genuinely stronger. He was training to make sure he could beat Rigby hard enough to humiliate him back. The scene cut to McCooligans, where Benson asked Mordecai what happened to Skips. Mordecai said Skips had stuff to do. Rigby joked that Skips was probably resting his old man bones. The door slammed and Skips appeared. Rigby said, "Look who was back for thirds!" Skips walked to their table and sat down next to Mordecai. Benson told Skips not to do it. This warning from Benson showed that even their boss recognized this had gone too far, but Skips ignored the warning. He propped his arm up. Rigby propped his arm up and told Skips to say good night, calling him Gramps. Things ran in slow motion as the critical moment unfolded. Skips pulled out Rigby's Playco Arm Boy to expose the cheating. He grabbed Rigby's arm, lifted him completely off his seat, and smashed him down onto the table so hard it killed him. The flashback ended. This was manslaughter at minimum. Skips used so much force that he literally killed Rigby. Yes, Rigby had been cheating, but the appropriate response to discovering cheating in a bar game is to call it out verbally and maybe demand your money back if you bet on it. The response is not to physically assault someone with such extreme force that they die. Skips let his rage and wounded pride drive him to kill his co-worker over arm wrestling. There was no excuse for this level of violence. Back at the hospital, Skips said he was sorry and would make it up to Rigby. Death appeared laughing and said, "Well, well, well, if it was not old Skips." A portal appeared, and Death rode through on his motorcycle. Skips said Death's name. Death said Skips had not changed a bit and asked what the occasion was, if that was his buddy there. Death said Skips finally killed someone. Skips said he wanted Rigby back and proposed arm wrestling for him. If Skips won, he kept Rigby. If Death won, Death could take Skips instead. Death laughed and said big old Skips was finally coming in for some old-fashioned arm wrestling. Death said it was about time because Skips had been dodging him for years. Death said, now he got to beat Skips and take his immortal soul. Skips nodded. Death said, deal. They shook hands and a table appeared. Death said he had been waiting for this day. He took off his jacket to reveal an arm as muscular as Skips and kissed it. Death told Skips to set them up. They clasped hands and a referee appeared. The referee said, ready, go! Death and Skips arm wrestled. Sparks appeared from their combined fists, and the table rose in the air. A whirlpool appeared in the ground. Death laughed and said Skip's soul was his. Death almost slammed Skip's arm and asked if Skips had any last words. Skips yelled 2 words, Playco Arm Boy. Death said, huh. A bright white beam emerged and Skips slammed Death's arm. The room cleared. Death said, no, and asked how this was possible. Skips said he won and told Death to bring Rigby back and take a hike. Death said Skips should mark his words. Someday Death would have his immortal soul. Death got on his motorbike and made a portal in the wall. He spit Rigby's soul back into Rigby's mouth. Rigby coughed and woke up. Death rode his motorcycle into the portal. This revealed that Skips cheated against Death, using the same device Rigby had used against him. Skips saved Rigby's life, but only by risking his own immortal soul and by cheating. The hypocrisy was obvious. Skips was so upset about Rigby cheating that he killed him, then turned around and cheated against Death to fix his mistake. Skips apologized to Rigby for killing him back there, saying it was unprofessional. Rigby turned and saw stitches in his back. Rigby said water under the bridge and asked if Skips ended up cheating Death. Skips said he learned from the best and lifted up the Playco Arm Boy. They both said, oh, and laughed. Skips said seriously though, Rigby should not cheat. Skips said he only did it to save Rigby's life. The scene cut to Rigby and Skips heading down the hospital hallway. Rigby asked if everybody thought he was dead. Skips confirmed, yep. Rigby said, dude, they had to prank them. Skips said he thought he had had enough pranks for today. The episode treated this resolution far too lightly. Skips killed Rigby over arm wrestling, and the lesson was just, don't cheat. There was no real acknowledgement of how disproportionate Skips' response was. Yes, Rigby cheated at arm wrestling, which was wrong, but Skips destroyed property, invaded privacy, and committed manslaughter. The severity of Skips' actions far outweighed Rigby's offense. The fact that Rigby immediately forgave him and wanted to prank people showed the episode was not taking the death seriously. This episode revealed dangerous aspects of Skips' character. His entire identity was wrapped up in being the strongest person at the park. When that identity was threatened, he spiraled into destructive behavior that escalated to lethal violence. He could not accept defeat gracefully. He could not walk away from a meaningless bar game. He could not control his temper when denied a rematch. His pride mattered more to him than property, privacy, or even human life. Only when faced with losing his own soul did Skips finally do the right thing by bringing Rigby back. The episode also showed how dangerous it can be when people enable someone's worst instincts. Pops encouraged Skips to demand a rematch instead of helping him process the loss. Mordecai revealed the cheating to Skips, knowing how obsessed Skips already was. While neither Pops nor Mordecai intended for things to go this far, their actions contributed to the escalation. The whole situation could have been avoided if someone had just told Skips to let it go, and that being strong was not his only valuable quality as a person. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this depths. Next up, we have Muscle Man humiliating Mordecai and Rigby with the fake death birthday prank. Muscle Man orchestrating an entire fake birthday party, bailing someone out of jail, turning his co-workers into ghosts, and then faking his own death just to get revenge for an accidental soda spill represents one of the most disproportionate acts of retaliation in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone values revenge over basic human decency and proportional responses. The fact that Muscle Man's elaborate multi-stage prank almost backfired when he actually started choking and Mordecai refused to help because he thought it was another fake-out demonstrates how revenge schemes can create dangerous situations where nobody trusts anyone anymore. The episode began with Mordecai and Rigby lounging on the golf cart, asking what they were going to do that weekend, since nothing was going on. They heard a cart coming and saw it was Benson. They quickly gulped down their sodas, threw the cans away, and cleaned the cart as Muscle Man dropped off Pops and Benson. Muscle Man reminded Benson that the party was tonight and told him not to forget it. Benson said they would be there. Muscle Man said, "See you there," and drove away. Mordecai asked what that was all about. Pops asked what costumes Mordecai and Rigby were going to wear.
Mordecai and Rigby were confused about costumes.
Benson explained that Muscle Man was throwing a birthday party for High Five Ghost, and apparently it was a costume birthday party. Rigby asked to see the invitation. Mordecai said it was invite only. Benson asked if they got invited. Mordecai said they did not even know there was a party. Rigby confirmed he did not know either. Sun said, "Oh well," and snatched the invitation away, suggesting maybe they were not invited. Mordecai and Rigby stared at each other. This was the moment they realized they were specifically excluded from a party that everyone else at the park was invited to. The scene cut to Muscle Man putting lots of soda cans into an ice bucket. Mordecai approached and said they heard Muscle Man was having a party tonight and asked what time they should show up. Muscle Man dumped 3 cans of soda angrily and yelled that the answer was never because they were not invited. He dumped the last few cans into the ice bucket and drove away. Back at the house, Rigby complained about what Muscle Man's problem was and why he would not invite them to his party. Mordecai said he knew why Muscle Man was not inviting them. Rigby asked why. Mordecai reminded Rigby about when Rigby was choking that morning. The scene cut to a flashback from that morning. Rigby was choking loudly in the kitchen. Muscle Man chuckled and said to look at Rigby's face. Mordecai said, "Oh no, Rigby was choking." He walked over to Rigby and said not to worry, he had him. Muscle Man continued laughing until Rigby threw up his spit wad, which got in Muscle Man's soda and splashed in his face. Muscle Man was disgusted and said the choke wad spat soda in his face. He started whining hysterically. The scene cut back to the present. Rigby said that was not their fault because he was going to die. He pointed out they got Muscle Man a new soda. The scene cut back to the morning flashback where Muscle Man was still whining about the soda on his face.
Ridley downed him to quit whining and offered another soda, calling him a big baby. But Rigby tripped over a soda can while holding the glass, splashing more soda into Muscle Man's face. Rigby said, "Uh-oh." Muscle Man went into a ballistic frenzy, pushing the table against the wall, then whamming on it and lying on the floor still whining. This was the inciting incident. Rigby accidentally choked and his spit wad landed in Muscle Man's soda. This was not intentional. Mordecai was trying to save Rigby's life with the Heimlich maneuver. Then, when they tried to make it right by giving Muscle Man a new soda, Rigby accidentally tripped and spilled that one too. Again, this was an accident. There was no malice or intent to harm. These were just unfortunate mishaps. But Muscle Man took it as a personal attack that required elaborate revenge. Back in the present, Mordecai said, "Yep, that was probably why Muscle Man was not inviting them to his party." He said they had to go apologize. The scene cut to Mordecai and Rigby walking to Muscle Man's trailer. Rigby knocked on the door. Muscle Man asked, "What?" Mordecai said they were sorry about the soda thing that morning, so they bought their console as a peace offering. He said Muscle Man could borrow it for his party. Muscle Man said, 1, he did not know what they were talking about, and 2, he was busy. But he said he would still take their video game. He swiped the system from them and closed the trailer door.
Inside the trailer, Muscle Man told High Five Ghost that he found a video game system on the ground and suggested they see what happens when they put it in the microwave. This was pure malice. Mordecai and Rigby had come to apologize and offer a genuine peace offering with their expensive video game console. Muscle Man accepted their apology gift, but immediately threatened to destroy it. Rigby complained that Muscle Man better not trash their system because it was not cheap.
This showed Muscle Man was not interested in reconciliation.
He wanted revenge. Later, Mordecai and Rigby drove the cart and saw Muscle Man preparing decorations for the party. Rigby complained that Muscle Man was not going to invite them, even though they already said sorry. He asked what else they could do. Mordecai came up with an idea to use reverse psychology. He explained that if they made Muscle Man think they did not want to go to his party, then he would really want them to be there. Rigby said, "Nice." Mordecai said to just act like the party was lame and watch the invitations come rolling in. They drove over to Muscle Man while he prepared decorations. Mordecai said they did not want to go to his party. Muscle Man said, good, because he was not going to invite them anyway, so they should get lost. Mordecai said they were sorry about the soda. Muscle Man asked what they were talking about and told them to get lost. Mordecai gave up and drove away. The reverse psychology failed completely. That night, Mordecai and Rigby were lying on their beds. Rigby asked if they wanted to play video games. Mordecai reminded him they gave away their system. Rigby said, whatever. The party was going to be lame anyway, with just Pops, Skips, and Benson sitting around doing nothing. They heard thumping bass music from outside. Looking out the window, they saw what appeared to be a rocking party taking place in a tent in the middle of the park. They were amazed. Mordecai said, forget the invitation, they should just crash it. They showed up wearing unconvincing cat and dog masks. They encountered a huge, muscle-bound bouncer named Bobby at the tent entrance. Bobby said to hold up because they were not on the list. Rigby asked how Bobby knew they were not on the list. Bobby asked for their names. Mordecai said, Mordecai and Rigby. Bobby checked the list and confirmed they were not on it, saying he could only let people in who were on the list.
Muscle Man appeared at the window and told Bobby he could let some random guy in because he seemed legit.
Bobby showed that guy inside. Mordecai complained that guy did not even have a costume. They tried going around back through a window. A ghost appeared through the tent wall, holding a soda can and wearing shades. Rigby said it was Fives. They wished him happy birthday. The ghost said, what? Mordecai apologized and said they thought he was someone else. The ghost laughed and said he was not High Five Ghost. He was his brother, Low Five Ghost. He asked what they were doing outside because the party was inside. Mordecai said they were not really invited. Low Five Ghost asked why not. Rigby said that was what they wanted to know, and they just wanted to get in. Low Five Ghost said he was not supposed to say this, but if they really wanted to get into the party, he could turn them into ghosts. They asked, really? Low Five Ghost said, yeah, then they would not have to go through the door and could go through the wall. Plus, their costumes would be more believable. He asked if they wanted to do it. They agreed excitedly. Low Five Ghost said up high, down low, and transformed them into ghosts by the power of high-fiving and low-fiving. This was where things became genuinely dangerous. Low Five Ghost offered to turn them into ghosts without explaining the full consequences. Once inside, they greeted everyone. Pops was dressed like an ice cream cone, Benson like a vampire, and High Five Ghost was wearing an eye patch. They wished High Five Ghost happy birthday. Benson asked if they got invited after all. Mordecai said, you could say that. Pop said, what wonderful costumes. Rigby said, these were not costumes. High Five Ghost asked if they were not costumes. Mordecai confirmed they were totally ghosts. Rigby said High Five Ghost's brother turned them into ghosts so they could sneak in and wish him happy birthday. High Five Ghost said, "Oh no, this was bad." Rigby misunderstood and said, "Yeah, they were bad. They did whatever it took to party." High Five Ghost clarified they had bigger problems. If they did not get turned back into themselves soon, they would be stuck as ghosts forever. Mordecai and Rigby were shocked. Mordecai told them to change them back. High Five Ghost said he could not because he did not know how. High Five Ghost angrily confronted his brother at the snack table, asking why he turned them into ghosts and demanding he change them back. Low Five Ghost admitted he did not know how, but maybe their dad knew. High Five Ghost's father examined them and said, "Not good." He said if they wanted to turn back into themselves, they had to scare someone. It was the only way. Mordecai suggested scaring Muscle Man since he did not know they were there yet and would not be expecting it. They ran into the bathroom and turned off the light. When Muscle Man came in and turned on the light, Mordecai and Rigby screamed at him. Muscle Man yelled in shock and grabbed his chest, falling to the ground. Rigby asked what he was doing. Mordecai said, "Oh no, Muscle Man was having a heart attack." They dragged Muscle Man into the party room. Mordecai yelled that they needed a doctor. High Five Ghost's father told everyone to back up and asked what happened. Mordecai explained they scared him and he fell over. High Five Ghost's father told them to step back and let Muscle Man breathe. He checked his breath and said Muscle Man was not breathing. He began administering CPR. Then he said Muscle Man was gone. The crowd gasped in horror as High Five Ghost's father closed Muscle Man's eyes for the last time. High Five Ghost cried out that they killed his best friend. Mordecai said they were sorry. Rigby said they did not mean it. Mordecai said they just wanted to get into the party. This moment was genuinely traumatic. Mordecai and Rigby believed they had killed their co-worker. The guilt and horror they felt in that moment was real. High Five Ghost's grief over losing his best friend appeared genuine. Everyone at the party witnessed what looked like a tragic death. The emotional damage from this moment would be significant. Then, Muscle Man's eyes opened slightly. He said, "Got you, dudes. This was the best prank ever." He laughed and whooped. Mordecai asked what was wrong with him. Rigby asked if this was a prank. Muscle Man confirmed, "Yeah, it was," and they fell for it. Benson said, "Wait, he thought he was invited to a costume party." Muscle Man said he did, but that was just the beginning of his plan. A flashback montage showed Muscle Man narrating his elaborate scheme. He explained that when they spilled soda in his face, he knew he had to get them back. That was when he decided to throw a party. He invited people and made sure Mordecai and Rigby were aware of it. Then they bailed Low Five Ghost out of jail so he could turn them into ghosts. The montage ended. Muscle Man said it was the ultimate prank, the ultimate payback. This revelation showed just how disproportionate Muscle Man's revenge was. He threw an entire birthday party, not to celebrate his best friend, but as an elaborate prank setup. He bailed someone out of jail specifically for this prank. He manipulated everyone at the party into participating in his scheme. He made Mordecai and Rigby think they committed manslaughter. All of this because of an accidental soda spill. Mordecai asked if Muscle Man wanted to prank them at the party. How come he did not invite them? Muscle Man said, "Easy. Not inviting them was the only way he knew they would show. It was called reverse psychology." He mispronounced psychology with a hard ch sound. Rigby said this was the lamest and most expensive prank ever. Muscle Man said it was worth it, and maybe next time they would think twice before spilling soda in his face. Mordecai said with unamused sarcasm that, yeah, they would definitely think twice. Benson said he was out of there. The guests all started to leave. Muscle Man asked where everyone was going because there was still plenty of food. He began stuffing his face with food and laughing. Then, Muscle Man began to choke. Rigby said, "Oh, Muscle Man was choking." He told High Five Ghost's father to help because he was a doctor. High Five Ghost's father said, "No, he was not a doctor. That was just part of the prank." He asked if anyone knew the Heimlich. The remaining guests looked at each other helplessly. Rigby said Mordecai knew it. Mordecai said, "Yeah, right. Muscle Man was just faking it." He predicted that as soon as he helped, Muscle Man would say, "Got you again, dudes." Mordecai said he was sick of it. Rigby asked if Muscle Man was pranking them. Muscle Man shook his head while continuing to choke. He fell to his knees. Mordecai and Rigby realized he was not pranking them. Mordecai said he had Muscle Man and performed the Heimlich, getting the food out of his throat. Mordecai said he hoped this made them even. This was the perfect illustration of why elaborate revenge pranks are dangerous. Muscle Man had destroyed all trust. When he genuinely needed help, Mordecai initially refused because he assumed it was another prank. Muscle Man could have died because his own revenge scheme trained people not to believe him. The boy who cried wolf scenario played out in real time. If Mordecai had waited even a few more seconds, Muscle Man might have actually died from choking. Muscle Man told Low Five Ghost to change them back. Low Five Ghost snapped his fingers and returned Mordecai and Rigby to their normal selves. Muscle Man apologized for pranking them so hard. He said it was going to be a real party now, and they could stay if they wanted to. He offered his hand, and Mordecai shook it. Benson asked seriously if this was a real party or not. Muscle Man asked if throwing a cassette tape answered the question, then missed the tape deck. Benson said, "No, that did not really answer his question." Muscle Man walked over, picked up the tape, and started the music. Everyone began dancing. Mordecai asked if Rigby could believe this. Rigby said no, and asked if next time Mordecai saw Muscle Man with a soda, could he remind Rigby not to spill it in his face. Mordecai said yes, he could. Muscle Man appeared with an odd-looking video game system and said he thought they would like to have it back. They thanked him. Mordecai asked, "Wait, was this just paper mache?" Muscle Man confirmed yeah and apologized, saying he sold the real one to a pawn shop as part of the prank. Mordecai asked if he was serious. Rigby asked what was wrong with him. Then Muscle Man pulled the real console from behind his back and said, "Got you, dudes." The episode ended with yet another fake-out. The episode demonstrates the toxic cycle of revenge and how disproportionate responses escalate situations beyond reason. Muscle Man's original grievance was legitimate but minor. Getting soda splashed in your face twice is annoying and embarrassing, but the appropriate response would be asking for a sincere apology, maybe expecting them to pay for dry cleaning if his clothes were ruined, or at most, pulling a small, harmless prank back. Instead, Muscle Man threw an entire fake birthday party, spent significant amounts of money, bailed someone out of jail, permanently transformed two people into ghosts until they scared someone, made them think they killed him, and destroyed all trust between himself and his co-workers. The punishment was wildly disproportionate to the crime, and it almost resulted in actual tragedy when nobody believed Muscle Man was really choking. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Muscle Man faking his whole life falling apart just to win a prank war. Muscle Man making everyone believe he was literally dying that very day just to create an elaborate marriage proposal represents one of the most emotionally manipulative acts in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone values spectacle and dramatic gestures over the emotional well-being of the people who care about them. The fact that Benson spent $12,000 helping Muscle Man complete his bucket list, that High Five Ghost believed he was losing his best friend, and that everyone gave tearful goodbye speeches thinking they would never see Muscle Man again, demonstrates how far this deception went. The reveal that it was all a metaphor for ending his bachelor life felt like a betrayal of trust that permanently damaged how his friends viewed him. The episode began with Benson addressing everyone about a smell under the house. Muscle Man interrupted and said he had some news. He got up and walked over to Benson while the others looked at each other. Muscle Man pulled out a paper and said he wanted to let everyone know that he had smelled his own whiff of departure. He too had a list of things he wanted to get done by the end of the day. He gave the list to Benson. Benson read items from the list. Dance on giant toy piano mat. Drive a monster truck. Get comfortable with my body. That last one was crossed out. Rigby asked what was going on. Muscle Man said he went to see Dr. Henry and he would leave this world tonight. It was all going down at Wing Kingdom at 7 o'clock. High Five Ghost asked if Muscle Man meant leaving the world or the park, emphasizing the question. Muscle Man sighed and said he wished he could say more. Mordecai said, "Dude," questioningly.
Muscle Man told them to take a few minutes to go over the list while he got his papers in order. He said he hoped he could count on their support that day. Muscle Man left. This opening established what appeared to be Muscle Man announcing his imminent death. The phrase, "leave this world tonight," has a clear meaning in common usage. It means dying. Muscle Man deliberately used ambiguous language that strongly implied death without technically lying. This was calculated manipulation. He knew exactly how people would interpret his words. Rigby said he did not buy it, and Muscle Man had to be messing with them. High Five Ghost agreed and asked why Muscle Man would keep something like that from him. He pointed out the others were second-tier friends, so he got that, but Muscle Man would tell him at least. Skip said they knew how Muscle Man was, and he liked to put up a strong front. Skips looked at the list and mentioned swimming with dolphins, laughing that Muscle Man really should do that before he stopped mid-sentence. Pops asked before what, repeating it desperately. Suddenly, a portal opened and Death drove out on his motorcycle. He stepped off and asked if any of them knew where he might find Muscle Man. High Five Ghost stammered that Muscle Man was not there. He moved, name change and everything, so Death should just go home. Death lashed. Death said not to tell him Muscle Man had cold feet. He said no matter, they would just stick to the original plan for tonight at Wing Kingdom. Benson asked what? Death was in on this. Death said Muscle Man's time had come. Death had been where Muscle Man was going, and it was a brutal place full of misery and anguish. Death said, "Oh well, and to have a good one." He got back on his motorcycle and drove back through the portal. This was the moment that confirmed everyone's worst fears. Death himself showing up and talking about Muscle Man's appointment removed any doubt. This was not Muscle Man pranking them. Death was a supernatural entity they had encountered before who literally collected souls.
Rigby listed the evidence. Bucket list. He leaves this world tonight. And now he has an appointment with Death. Skip said you did not need a pen to connect those dots. High Five Ghost said he could not lose his best friend and asked who would spot him at the gym. He asked who would eat his leftovers because he could not just throw them away. Benson placed a hand on High Five Ghost and told him to stop because that helped no one. Benson said what Muscle Man needed right now was friends who could hold it together and be strong for him. High Five Ghost stayed strong. Benson said most importantly, Muscle Man needed friends who would help him finish his bucket list. They went to Muscle Man's trailer. Benson entered and said they had to talk about the list. Muscle Man yelled from the bathroom to hold their horses. He was using it. Muscle Man's phone rang, and he asked someone to take a message because he had been waiting for that call. High Five Ghost picked up the phone. The scene cut to Dr. Henry's office. Dr. Henry said he was trying to reach Muscle Man with some news about his condition. High Five Ghost told Skips and Pops it was Dr. Henry, then asked the doctor what condition. Dr. Henry said he was afraid he could not tell High Five Ghost that due to doctor-patient confidentiality. High Five Ghost asked the doctor to just be straight with him about whether it was serious. Dr. Henry said yes, very serious. He said Muscle Man would not be with them much longer. High Five Ghost asked worriedly if the doctor meant what he thought. Dr. Henry confirmed, yep, and turned to the window, saying, very soon, Muscle Man would be in a better place. High Five Ghost thanked the doctor, dropped the phone to hang up, and turned to everyone else. He said it was true. Everyone gasped. High Five Ghost said he should have seen this coming because Muscle Man's cholesterol must be off the charts. He ate those deep-fried pig butt cheeks every day, and High Five Ghost just watched him do it. This phone call from Dr. Henry was the final piece of evidence that made the deception complete. A licensed medical professional was telling them Muscle Man would not be with them much longer and would be in a better place. These are standard euphemisms doctors use when discussing terminal patients with family members. The fact that Dr. Henry participated in this deception raises serious ethical questions about his medical license. He violated patient confidentiality by confirming Muscle Man had a serious condition, then used language specifically designed to make them think Muscle Man was dying. Skips placed a hand on High Five Ghost and said he could not blame himself. Mordecai agreed and said Muscle Man lived life to the fullest and he was sure Muscle Man had no regrets. Rigby said he figured Muscle Man had at least 3 or 4 years left. Pop said sadly that it was bad show. Muscle Man came out of the bathroom after flushing and asked if they were down to help him finish what was on the list. Benson brought out his wallet and started to tear up. He said, sure, whatever Muscle Man needed was on him. This was Muscle Man's day. Muscle Man said, all right, let's do this. A montage showed the group going through Muscle Man's bucket list. They started with driving a monster truck. Benson wrote a check to a monster truck driver. Muscle Man got in a yellow monster truck, fist pumped, then drove over a row of cars while the others clapped. He spun donuts and crashed into the building wall, making Benson pay extra for damage. Next was dancing on a giant toy piano mat. In a toy store, Muscle Man hopped around on a giant red toy piano mat, then slid to the other side. Skips gave him a thumbs up. They showed Muscle Man swimming with dolphins and eating pizza while the others watched. Benson paid a pizza delivery guy holding 9 boxes of pizza. The guys watched from behind a fence, cheering as Muscle Man wrestled an alligator and fed it pizza. Benson was shown receiving money from an ATM. He gave the money to a jetpack worker who signaled that Muscle Man could fly now. Muscle Man took off into the sky with tears streaming from his eyes. Seeing this made Benson cry, but he was interrupted by the jetpack worker gesturing for more money because Muscle Man wanted to go again. This montage showed Benson hemorrhaging money to fulfill what he believed were a dying man's last wishes. Every activity cost significant amounts. The monster truck rental and damage, the toy store, the dolphins, 9 pizzas, an alligator wrestling venue, and jetpack rentals. Benson was spending his personal savings because he cared about Muscle Man and wanted to give him a good final day. Back at the trailer, Muscle Man said it was time to give everyone all his stuff. He placed a box on his air conditioner. Mordecai said Muscle Man should hang on to this. Muscle Man said he could not take it with him where he was going. Tears welled up as he started to cry. He yelled, "No, this was a mistake!" He took the box and threw it to the ground. The others cringed as he started to freak out, knocking over furniture. Skips grabbed him as he yelled, asking if he still had more time. Benson pleaded with Muscle Man to hold it together. He said as hard as it was, Muscle Man was not alone. They were with him to the end. Muscle Man calmed down and said they were right. He had to get through this day the same way he lived the rest of his life, chowing down on wings with his best bros while they all wore matching white tuxedos. The scene cut to Wing Kingdom with everyone in their tuxedos. Muscle Man and Rigby seemed to be the only ones with an appetite to eat. Mordecai asked if Muscle Man was having fun and enjoying his wings. Muscle Man finished a wing and said, honestly, the wings tasted bittersweet, but he just wanted to have them one last time.
Sigby covered his eyes and said he could not watch. Benson placed a hand on Rigby's shoulder and told him not to look away, but to look at Muscle Man. Muscle Man had his face buried in the wing box, eating sloppily. When he raised his head to breathe and chew, Benson pushed away Rigby and continued speaking. He said, this guy, from whom they had all learned so much. This guy, his joke-telling, his loyalty. High Five Ghost said, near crying, that he never wanted to be anyone's best friend until he met Muscle Man. Muscle Man shook his head emotionally and said, you guys. Benson stood up and said, no, let him finish. He said what they would remember most about Muscle Man, more than anything else, was, and he held in a vomit, excuse me, Muscle Man's passion. Benson unhooked the jacket on his tuxedo and waved it above his head. The others, minus Muscle Man, did the same, causing Muscle Man to whimper. A clock on the wall showed the time was now 6:55. Everyone surrounded Muscle Man. Pop said Muscle Man had a style that could not be taught. Muscle Man said that was the ultimate compliment coming from someone so dapper. He high-fived Pops and turned to Mordecai and Rigby. He said they really knew how to kick back and bro out. He respected that. Mordecai said they were workaholics compared to Muscle Man. Rigby asked if they had unlimited wings on the other side. Muscle Man said he knew so. He high-fived Mordecai and Rigby with both hands and walked to Skips. Skips said Muscle Man always seemed to know a guy, and Skips was proud to have been one of those guys. Muscle Man wiped away a tear and said this was funny. Suddenly, Skips was the one being open, and Muscle Man was the man of few words. Skips smiled sadly and said he never thought he would see the day. Muscle Man high-fived Skips with both hands and walked to Benson. Muscle Man asked if Benson meant all that stuff he said earlier. Benson said every word. The two slapped hands and shared a bro hug while crying. They broke the hug, sighed, and Muscle Man walked over to High Five Ghost. High Five Ghost's lips quivered as he started to say he did not, but Muscle Man put his finger on High Five Ghost's mouth and said, shh, he did not have to. Muscle Man knew. High Five Ghost smiled, and they high-fived together, making Muscle Man whimper afterwards. Muscle Man said not to follow him. He started to walk towards the restrooms, making High Five Ghost wail in sadness. As Muscle Man walked, flashbacks from previous episodes were shown. The thoughts made his eyes water, and he stopped at the door. The others stared, watching him. Muscle Man said he loved them. Saying this caused the others to burst into tears as he walked through the door. This entire goodbye sequence was genuine emotional devastation. Every single person there believed they were saying goodbye to Muscle Man forever. High Five Ghost was losing his best friend. Benson was losing an employee he had come to respect. Skips was losing someone he considered one of his guys. Pops, Mordecai, and Rigby were all losing a friend. The tears were real. The pain was real. The grief was real. Muscle Man watched them suffer through this and said nothing to stop it. He let them believe he was walking to his death. Everyone continued to cry until Death walked in and asked where he might find Muscle Man. Skips glared and said in the back. Pops rested a hand on Skip's arm and said, easy. Death said, right then, and walked away. Rigby asked what they were going to tell Starla. Starla and John Sorenstein walked in dressed up. Starla asked where Mitchie was, saying he told her to be here at 7 for something important. Mordecai asked if she meant she did not know. Starla asked, know what? High Five Ghost started to tell her, but all the lights in the building suddenly shut off. As the restroom door opened, fog billowed out.
a cart with white flowers, an ice sculpture of Muscle Man, and Muscle Man himself were being pushed by Death. Starla gasped, and Death set the cart next to a boombox.
A dramatic zoom-in of Muscle Man's face occurred. Death snapped, and an object covered by a tarp appeared. He pulled off the tarp to reveal a tombstone that read, "So long, bros, Muscle Man." Starla yelled no and asked what they did. She ran up to Muscle Man, crying his name repeatedly. She continued crying and climbed to Muscle Man. Skips quickly took her away. John said Muscle Man's last request was that he play a tape for everyone. He placed the tape in the boombox and clicked play. As the music started, Muscle Man suddenly woke up. He stood up, ripped his shirt and pants off, and confetti fell as he began to dance. Pop said with eyes wide in awe that it was like a phoenix from the flame. Muscle Man continued to dance as Mordecai and Rigby stared in utter shock with their mouths hanging open. Starla's eyeshadow ran down her face, and Benson's confusion turned into rage. Muscle Man yelled, "Now!" and Death pressed a red button that sent fireworks above Muscle Man. This was the moment of revelation. Everything had been theater. The tombstone, the flowers, the ice sculpture, Death's participation, all of it was staged. Muscle Man was not dying, he was proposing. Death handed Muscle Man a ring. Muscle Man walked to Starla and took her hands. He said she had been by his side through thick and thin, through slick and greasy. He could not think of anyone he would rather have as his co-pilot for the rest of his days. His friends helped him bury Muscle Man for good today. No more wild nights, no more homemade firecrackers. He was a new man now for his old lady. That new man was Mitch. "Pleased to meet you, Starla." He knelt on one knee. Starla asked what in a voice sore from crying. Muscle Man yelled for John to reveal a banner saying, "Marry me, Starla, love Mitch." Muscle Man asked if Starla would marry him. Starla said no. Muscle Man was dumbfounded and said, but he gave his old self a memorial for her. Starla said that was why she could not marry him. She wanted to marry the man she fell in love with, and that was Muscle Man. Muscle Man asked if she was for real. Could he still be good old Muscle Man and have his sweet, fun bun? Starla said that was the only way. Muscle Man said, okay, let him try again. He knelt on one knee again and asked if Starla would marry him, the Muscle Man version. Starla said yes. Mordecai asked, wait, so Muscle Man was fine this whole time? Muscle Man finished kissing Starla and said he was as healthy as can be. Rigby asked then, what was all that stuff with Dr. Henry? Muscle Man said he just had to make sure he was fit enough to keep up with Starla. He thanked them for helping him finish his bucket list. Benson was furious and red, saying, thanks, he blew 12 grand on Muscle Man that day. High Five Ghost asked if Muscle Man even knew what he put them through. Mordecai said, yeah, they all thought Muscle Man was going to die. Muscle Man asked what they were talking about. Rigby said Muscle Man had an appointment with death. Benson said Muscle Man had to get his papers in order. Muscle Man said his toilet papers. He had to fold them into little triangles so his place would look nice for the after party. Death said he was only there to deliver Muscle Man's aunt's ring from the underworld. Mordecai said with arms crossed that this was not cool. Muscle Man said, oh, come on, and held up a copy of Metaphors for Becoming a Husband. He said this was textbook engagement story. You shed your bachelor self before you can get married and be a husband. All that death stuff was a metaphor. Benson yelled that I leave this world tonight was not a metaphor. Muscle Man had a realization and said, oh, he saw what they were saying. Sorry about that. Rigby said next time Muscle Man died, he was on his own, and that was seriously uncool. Everyone except Benson, High Five Ghost, Muscle Man, and Starla left grumbling.
Benson sternly said Muscle Man owed him $12,000 and walked away.
Muscle Man asked High Five Ghost if he got it.
High Five Ghost's expression of anger turned into happiness. He said, "Best proposal ever," and high-fived Muscle Man. The episode treated this resolution far too lightly, given the emotional trauma Muscle Man inflicted. Yes, High Five Ghost forgave him immediately, because he was just happy his best friend was alive. But that does not excuse what happened. Muscle Man deliberately manipulated everyone into believing he was dying. He used death's presence to make it believable. He convinced a doctor to participate in the deception. He accepted $12,000 from Benson, knowing it was under false pretenses. He watched his friends cry and grieve and said nothing to stop their suffering. The excuse that this was a textbook engagement story and the death was metaphorical does not hold up, because Muscle Man actively participated in making everyone believe it was literal death, not metaphorical. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Pops forcing Benson to bottle his anger until it nearly kills him. Pops ordering Benson to completely suppress his anger and threatening to fire him if he yelled at Mordecai and Rigby represents one of the most dangerous management decisions in regular show history. This episode shows what happens when someone in authority enforces unrealistic behavioral changes without understanding the consequences. The fact that Pop's well-intentioned order to stop yelling literally transformed Benson into a destructive orb of fury that nearly obliterated the entire park demonstrates how forcing someone to bottle up legitimate workplace frustration can create catastrophic outcomes far worse than the original problem. The episode opened with Pops chasing a butterfly with a jar. He was about to catch it when Benson yelled off-screen at Mordecai and Rigby about not doing something the right way.
The butterfly flew away.
Benson was seen with Mordecai and Rigby by a shrub holding a chainsaw. Mordecai said their way was totally faster. Rigby agreed it cut the time in half. Benson said they were actually cutting it in half, calling them idiots. The chainsaw failed to start, and Benson yelled that they managed to break the saw in the process. Now they had to buy a new one. Annoyed, Pops walked away. The scene cut to the garden, where Pops was drawing a rose on a notebook. Benson yelled off-screen, asking what they were doing and mentioning soda. Pops drew a line in the wrong place due to the distraction. Benson appeared and said they could not use soda. Mordecai mentioned the hose. Benson asked sarcastically if it was too hard to get the hose off the shed, calling it unbelievable. Pops looked on as he drew. Rigby said at least it was diet because nobody drinks that. Benson said he drank diet. Pops angrily scribbled his drawing, grunted angrily, and walked away in anger and frustration. Benson continued yelling that they ruined the hose. This opening montage established that Benson's constant yelling was disrupting Pop's peaceful activities throughout the day. Every time Pops tried to do something relaxing like catching butterflies or drawing, Benson's voice interrupted him. While Benson had legitimate grievances about Mordecai and Rigby breaking equipment and making mistakes, his volume and frequency of yelling was affecting everyone at the park, not just his targets. However, Pop's response to this problem would prove far more destructive than Benson's yelling ever was. The scene cut to Pops in his father's office playing with army men. Pop said, "Okay, men, this was the hour of their prominence and on his signal to charge." Benson yelled off-screen asking if they were kidding him. Pops laid back, making a very irritated face expression. The scene cut to outside where the golf cart was scratched up and Mordecai was holding wood. Benson took it and asked what it was. Sandpaper. He said they were scratching up the whole thing. Pop's head appeared coming out of the office, asking if Benson would come see him for a moment, please. Mordecai and Rigby teased that somebody was busted, then rapped about Benson being busted. Benson told them to grow up. In Mr. Mellard's office, Benson sighed and asked what Pops wanted, saying he was in the middle of something. Pops told him to have a seat. After Benson sat down, Pops asked if Benson knew why he called him in. Benson guessed Pops lost the kernel again and suggested trying under his hat. Pops found the kernel under his hat, then put the army men in a drawer. He said it was a problem concerning Mordecai and Rigby. Benson said what else was new and told Pops not to worry because he would take care of it. Pops asked if they understood each other. Benson said absolutely, and that he had already warned them that one more screw-up and they were both fired. Pops said, "But Benson." He was referring to Benson. Benson asked what in confusion. Pops said he would like Benson to stop yelling at Mordecai and Rigby. Benson scoffed and asked if Pops was kidding. Pops said quite the opposite, explaining it was too negative and bad for morale. Benson asked what morale, saying those slackers never did anything unless you yelled at them. Pops said there was never a reason to yell at anyone. Benson said they gave him 1,000,000 reasons every day and asked if Pops just wanted him to be nice to them. Pops said Benson did not have to be nice, just not yell. This was where Pops made his critical error. He was conflating yelling with effective management. Yes, Benson yelled frequently and loudly, but Benson was trying to manage 2 employees who consistently broke equipment, ignored instructions, and created more work for everyone else. Pops was not offering Benson any alternative management strategies. He was simply ordering Benson to stop expressing frustration vocally without addressing why Benson felt frustrated in the first place, or how Benson should handle repeated insubordination and incompetence. Benson sighed and said he appreciated the concern, but knew how to do his job. Pops said he thought it was clear that his father put Pops in charge of running the park when his father was not around. Benson confirmed yes. Pops said that meant Benson must do what Pops said. Benson said technically yes. Pops said he was ordering Benson to stop yelling at Mordecai and Rigby. Benson tried to protest, but Pops asked sternly if he understood. Benson said understood. Pops had pulled rank and used his authority to force Benson into compliance. This was particularly hypocritical since Pops was using his position of power to demand Benson not use his position of power. Outside, Rigby asked what Pops wanted. Benson started to respond but began yelling that they were still not done. He caught himself and spoke through his teeth, asking if they were still not done. Mordecai said Benson told them to take it nice and easy. Rigby said he got it now because it takes time to do things right. Mordecai said, "You rush and make mistakes." Benson face-palmed and said that was not the point he was trying to make. Mordecai said they started thinking about why clean something anyway, because dirt was a natural thing and part of life. Benson furiously turned red and angrily sizzled. Rigby asked, "What is a hose?" repeating the word philosophically. Benson angrily growled, still red. Rigby accidentally sprayed water on Benson and apologized. Benson furiously kicked Mordecai and Rigby out of his sight. They ran away. Pops appeared asking what they just discussed. Benson tried to protest that Mordecai and Rigby were totally asking for it, but Pops said he was serious about this issue. Pops threatened that if Benson yelled at them again, he would have to write Benson up. Benson rubbed his face, angrily growled, and said okay, he would try to get it under control. This escalation showed Pops was willing to use progressive discipline against Benson for the same behavior Benson used progressive discipline for with Mordecai and Rigby. The irony was lost on Pops that he was treating Benson exactly how he claimed Benson should not treat his employees. A clock transition showed Benson in the computer room, searching for free anger management tips. He tried searching multiple approaches. A video of Fitch Munderson appeared, offering to help control anger for $60. Benson said, "Nope," and searched again. The screen was loading slowly. Benson growled angrily, then started saying repeatedly. He sighed and said he guessed it worked. This showed Benson was genuinely trying to comply with Pop's order. He was researching techniques and attempting to manage his anger through meditation and mantras. The scene cut to downstairs, where the whole place had been torn apart. Mordecai and Rigby were searching for something. Mordecai asked if Benson had seen the keys to the cart. Benson chanted repeatedly. Rigby said they could not find the keys anywhere and accidentally broke a vase. From the window, 2 people were seen driving the cart. Mordecai said, "Never mind, he thought he knew where the keys were." Benson roared in anger. Mordecai and Rigby ran away screaming. Pops appeared infuriated and said, "Benson," he warned him. Pops wrote on a clipboard angrily. Benson asked if Pops was writing him up. Pops asked if Benson knew what happened next and handed Benson the paper angrily. Benson said, "Of course, verbal warning, write-up, fired." But Pops would not fire him. Pops said he would do what he must. Benson asked what, and said Pops could not take this job away from him because it was all he had. Pops apologized and threatened that if Benson yelled at Mordecai and Rigby again, he would be forced to fire Benson. Pops left. Benson furiously turned red and angrily began jumping several times while grunting in anger. This threat revealed the true stakes. Benson's entire livelihood and identity were wrapped up in his job as park manager. Pops was threatening to take away everything Benson had over yelling. The punishment was wildly disproportionate to the offense. Yes, Benson yelled too much. But firing someone over raising their voice when managing problem employees who consistently break expensive equipment and destroy property was an extreme overreaction. Pops was essentially telling Benson to choose between his job and his natural stress response to legitimate workplace problems. Skips appeared and told Benson to try counting to 10. Benson furiously turned around and angrily grunted. Skip said, "Better make it 100, and left. Benson started counting. He counted all the way to 77 before he stopped and saw Mordecai and Rigby covered in pink paint laughing. Mordecai said they were finally painting the shed. Rigby threw himself on the wall, followed by Mordecai, who went through the wall. Benson turned red and angrily growled while counting 78, 79, 80, 81. Rigby asked what Benson was doing. Benson continued counting. Mordecai said he did not know, but asked what Rigby thought Benson would do when he got to 100. Mordecai, Rigby, and Benson all counted together through the 90s. The scene cut to Benson furiously walking into a bookstore. He angrily put a Fitch and Kimmy book on the table, leaving a hot handprint. The cashier checked the book, and Benson angrily walked out. The scene cut to Benson's apartment, room 1635. Benson inserted a tape into his Walkman and rested. Fitch's voice said the key to managing anger was control, and one should never yell, even if it was to pass the salt. Benson had a flashback to when he was younger at the dinner table with his family talking loudly. Young Benson asked to pass the salt, please. Benson's father told everyone to be quiet because Benson had something to say. Young Benson said pass embarrassedly. Benson's father told his son he would never get anything in life if he did not yell for it. Young Benson started raising his voice, saying, "Pass the salt!" Benson's dad said, "Attaboy," and passed the salt shaker. Suddenly, an earthquake occurred, showing a giant angry Pops ripping off the roof. Pops yelled that Benson was fired and pointed at young Benson angrily. Young Benson screamed, "No!" The scene transitioned back to Benson in his apartment. Enraged, Benson stepped on and angrily threw the Walkman, breaking a portrait. He then violently jumped into the TV. The scene cut to outside with Benson still screaming. An easy chair was thrown out and broke a window. This flashback revealed that Benson's yelling was rooted in his upbringing. His father taught him that yelling was necessary to get what you wanted in life. This was Benson's learned behavior from childhood. Pops was demanding Benson unlearn decades of conditioning without providing any support, training, or alternative coping mechanisms. The nightmare vision of Pops firing him showed how much this threat was psychologically damaging Benson. The destruction of his apartment showed Benson was displacing his anger onto objects since he could not express it appropriately at work. Benson looked at himself in the mirror while red. He told himself to keep it together because he still had a whole day of work left. The scene cut back to the park, where Benson was angrily walking and leaving fiery footprints in the ground. A guy asked if Benson was okay. Benson knocked him out of the way violently and said he was fine. Mordecai and Rigby drove fast past Benson in the golf cart. Mordecai was driving blindfolded. Rigby said, "Almost the record." They crashed into a tree and fell to the grass. Rigby said, "Not quite the record." Mordecai and Rigby came up to Benson, who was already heated with rage. Mordecai apologized. Benson said no. Rigby worried that here it came. Benson said he was not going to yell. Mordecai and Rigby celebrated. Benson repeated he was not going to yell. The scene zoomed into Benson's head. His gumballs turned bright orange. Then 4 gumballs went up in the air, catching on fire. Then the rest caught on fire with the 4 gumballs spinning in a circle. Sparks appeared on Benson's body as he got more and more angry, but tried not to yell. Mordecai asked if Benson was okay. Benson became an orb of fury, burning all ground around him and sucking in loose objects. He then hovered into the air. The ground below crumbled as Mordecai and Rigby backed away. The golf cart flew toward Benson and was destroyed. Skips and Pops came in another golf cart. Skips asked what happened. Mordecai said he did not know. Benson saw them crash the cart, and instead of laying into them, he said he was not going to yell. Rigby said, and then Benson turned into that. Skip said Benson was holding all of his anger in. Mordecai asked why he would do that. Pops walked in and said, because of him. Everyone asked, what? Pops said he told Benson that if he did not stop yelling at them, he would fire Benson. This was the moment Pops realized his mistake. His order to stop yelling had created a literal supernatural disaster. Benson's suppressed rage had manifested as a destructive force that was tearing apart the park. The orb was sucking in objects and burning everything around it. This was far more dangerous than Benson's yelling ever was. Skips told Pops he could not do that. Pops said he was technically Benson's boss. Skips said Pops could not make Benson bottle up his anger like that. Skips told Mordecai and Rigby they had to get Benson to yell at them. Mordecai called Benson a sorry excuse for a manager. Rigby called him a nasal-voiced loser loner. Mordecai told him to go back to night school and learn how to have a personality. Rigby revealed they were the ones who kept sending pizzas to Benson's apartment. Mordecai said they switched the detergent with coffee. The orb of anger increased its size. Mordecai said it was just making it worse. He told Pops he had to tell Benson it was okay to yell at them. Pops said he could not because there was never a reason to yell at people. Mordecai told Pops to look around because the park was disintegrating and Benson was going to explode. Muscle Man flew by in his trailer screaming. Mordecai told Pops to do something. Pops finally yelled that he needed Benson to yell at Mordecai and Rigby. Benson said, but if he yelled, Pops would fire him. Pops told him to forget what he said. If Benson did not yell at Mordecai and Rigby right now, he was fired. Benson finally lost patience. He angrily opened his menacing eyes and screamed furiously, unleashing a yellow beam of fury from his mouth that struck Mordecai and Rigby. Skips and Pops were blown away by its sudden power. Benson yelled that they were lazy, no-good slackers who drove him nuts and asked if they could just listen to him once in their worthless lives. He said if they did, they would see he was trying to teach them simple responsibility and pride in doing a job well done. His voice began breaking as he continued. He said they would not know a job well done if they paid someone to do it for them, and even then they would screw it all up because they could not follow the simplest instructions, worrying more about looking cool than doing their job. Tears were streaming and blowing off his face. He exploded tremendously. Pops and Skips got up. Benson got up as well, limping. Pops asked if Benson was all right. Benson said yeah, he was fine. He apologized that things got so out of control. Pops said it was his mistake, and from now on he would leave park managing to the park manager. They shook hands. Pop said though he did wish Benson would not yell at Mordecai and Rigby so much.
Benson said happily, "Let him give it a shot." The trio looked down at Mordecai and Rigby, who were in a crater. Benson told them to clean this mess up or they were fired. He, Pops, and Skips all laughed. A high-pitched noise was heard, and the laughter was drowned out because Mordecai and Rigby got deafened by Benson's tirade. Mordecai asked what, and turned to Rigby asking what they were laughing at. Rigby asked what. They confusingly watched each other as the episode ended. The episode demonstrated that forcing someone to suppress legitimate emotions without providing alternatives or addressing root causes creates far worse outcomes than the original problem. Pops's order nearly destroyed the entire park and permanently damaged Mordecai and Rigby's hearing. His well-intentioned but misguided management of Benson's management style backfired catastrophically because he failed to understand that some level of vocal frustration was necessary given the circumstances Benson dealt with daily. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.